Part 79. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 814. Erosion? What erosion? This is the situation that Rooney and the others encountered. This kind of erosion is like a virus, except that it can spread through cognition. The information contained in the recording is its carrier, Kaylan explained. Although Rooney has been very careful to delete content involving forbidden knowledge, these recordings are still extremely dangerous. Kaylan couldn't help but feel lucky that others were not around him at this time, otherwise, Moju might not be the only one who was eroded. Why don't you have anything? Moju raised his hands in the air, a little at a loss. What should I do? Will I die? Are you afraid of death? Kaylan stared into her eyes and asked word by word. With the current methods, this kind of erosion cannot be treated, right? Moju took a few deep breaths and asked in as calm a tone as possible. Kaylan nodded, non-committal. Although Rooney mentioned that it might be possible to prevent the erosion from deepening by deleting memories, but to carry out that operation, the victim must be put into a state of deep sleep, and once entering deep sleep, Kaylan felt that Moju will most likely be like Rooney, dreaming of that terrifying starry sky. By that time, I am afraid that even if all the memories of the eroded person are deleted, it will be impossible to save them. Although Kaylan has not seen the starry sky described by Rooney in the recording, when Kaylan uses the holy word, the gaze from him is like the mass of the entire vast starry sky being pressed onto Kaylan. Above Ian's consciousness, this feeling is difficult to describe exactly in words, but Ian's subconscious kept telling him that the essence of the two is the same. The terrible starry sky that Rooney saw can actually be understood as his sight. How to say that very classic saying, when you look at the abyss is also looking at you. When Rooney saw the starry sky, it was actually equivalent to his sight sweeping across Rooney. In layman's terms, when things have developed to this point, he as a hunter has already set his sights. The prey Rooney accidentally entered the hunter's sight. At this time, it was impossible for the prey to pretend that it didn't know anything and withdraw from the hunter's sight. I'm not afraid of death, Moju said to Kaylan. In fact, as soon as I followed you into the depths of the forest, I already thought that I would die in this place. But Moju changed the topic. Even if I die, I hope to die with dignity, instead of being treated as an experimental subject and being torn into pieces by a group of white coats on the operating table. I can't live, I want to die. Cannot. Do you think I will use you as experimental material? Kaylan twitched the corner of his mouth. I have to say that Moju's divergent thinking is also broad enough, but from her perspective, she would think so, which is completely reasonable. If Rooney can repair the Shaojiankai frigate and return to the Ark, the immortal crew's first choice is definitely not to kill him, but to control him. The members of the crew's guild themselves are also plagued by erosion. With such a highly corrosive living sample that has been watched by him, the undead crew will absolutely spare no effort to study it. What's more, Rooney still carries the secret from the grey mist forest. It is easy to artificially create a corroded person who is on the verge of the critical point, but it is difficult to create such an excellent corroded person. After accepting the forbidden knowledge, the vast majority of people, like other crew members, their bodies will undergo a high degree of mutation in a short period of time, and eventually transform into corrosion. Even for symbionts that inserted alpha human gene fragments through gene editing projects, only Kaylan and the Prophet were able to survive for a long time, while mortal bodies like Rooney persisted for a whole life under severe erosion. Nian's physique can be said to be 1 in a million. From Moju's point of view, Kaylan and his group represent the official Ark. With the usual behavior of Ark's upper management, it is really possible that Moju will be captured and used as experimental material to study human body erosion. Although her value was vastly different from that of Rooney, but the key was that Moju didn't know that the undead crew would be fully capable of mass-producing this experimental material. Isn't it possible, Moju said as he slowly took a few steps back, then pulled out the pistol from his waist at an extremely fast speed and put it against his temple. She drew the gun very quickly, but in the eyes of Kaylan, who had the ability to stop time, the word fast was not at all related to her. Her entire set of actions was broken down into dozens of frames by Kaylan, and Kaylan had something to do with each frame. Opportunity to take the gun from her hand. But Kaylan didn't do that. Using strength to suppress the other party would only make the other party distrust him even more. The next exploration process is still long. If possible, Kaylan still hopes to have a good relationship with this lumberjack. No matter how strong the opponent is, in such a strange and dangerous place, it is better to have one more trustworthy teammate than one less. Even if the other person can only talk to him and chat with him, it is better than wandering alone in the forest. Rather than being brought back to the Ark alive by you, I would rather die here. Emoju raised his voice slightly, and pressed his index finger slightly harder on the trigger. Kaylan could see that as long as she showed any intention of bringing Emoju back for research, she would pull the trigger without hesitation. Then you can rest assured. I don't have any good impressions of those guys at the Institute. They still tried to treat me as a research subject. I can completely understand your mood, so can you put down the gun first, Kaylan advised. No, I can't completely believe you yet. Emoju originally wanted to negotiate terms with Kaylan, but just when she was about to speak, she found that she didn't know what kind of terms she should negotiate. The only thing Emoju had that could be used as a bargaining chip was his own life, but the problem was that Kaylan couldn't offer any bargaining chips. No verbal assurance could make her feel relieved. And even if she keeps a gun pointed at her temple, Ark will have countless ways to safely disarm her after returning. Okay, if you really want to die, then you can shoot. I have no objection. Kaylan suddenly gave up persuading, shrugged, and made a please gesture to Emoju. Emoju was stunned for a moment, and then a look of confusion appeared on her face. However, she did not ask why Kaylan's attitude changed so quickly. She just pretended to be relaxed and said, "Then stay away a little, be careful." Splattered with blood and brain matter. The pistol in her hand was a large caliber hunting pistol. If she were to shoot her head, not to mention making a hole, her head would probably be blown off. Of course, the greater possibility is that it will explode like a watermelon that was thrown to the ground. The inner hesitation only lasted for half a second before Emoju pulled the trigger. The gun didn't go off, and her head didn't explode like a watermelon. She raised the pistol in front of her in some astonishment, pulled out the magazine, opened the slide, and checked inside and out. There was no malfunction in the gun itself. She even tried firing at the wall. The sound of the gun was thunderous, and the large caliber armor-piercing bullet opened a hole in the metal-lined wall. What happened just now? Emoju didn't think about it. She pointed the gun at her head again, gritted her teeth and pulled the trigger. The gun still didn't go off. One rush of strength, another failure, 3 failures. When the first suicide attempt failed, most of the impulse had receded. When she pulled the trigger on herself for the second time, her hand was already shaking slightly, and now, she suddenly found that she didn't even have the courage to check the pistol again. You did it, right? Emoju raised his head, looked at Kaylan, and asked. She was right. With Ze-Logo's spatial ability, it was very easy to make a purely mechanical pistol unable to fire. Kaylan could even directly freeze Emoju in place, then slowly walk up to her and take the gun out of her hand. Look, you have no ability to resist at all. As long as I want to, you can't even commit suicide. So you might as well try to believe me once. I will never hand you over to a research institute or any other scientific research institution. And I won't treat you as experimental material. In fact, Kaylan didn't say anything clearly. With Emoju's anti-corrosion ability, her body has already undergone changes just after listening to these deleted recordings, so there is a high probability that she will not be able to survive Kaylan and the others. Coming out of the gray mist forest. Just like that Jack Garcia, she doesn't have much time left. Moju's eyes widened and he stared at Kaylan for several seconds before dropping the pistol on the ground and sitting on the ground in frustration. Even if you don't treat me as experimental material, then why don't you let me die? Dr. Lu in the recording has made it very clear that this disease cannot be cured by human medical treatment. Technology can't even extend my life. I know I only have a few days left to live. Kaylan sighed. Although he didn't say the hurtful truth just now, Moju obviously knew this in his heart. You are not even afraid of death, are you still afraid of the process of dying? Kaylan stepped forward and pulled Moju up from the ground. Humans have no treatment, but this does not mean that Alpha civilization does not have it. Maybe, in the core area of the gray mist forest, there is a way to slow down the erosion process. Are you comforting me? Moju showed a sad smile. That's what you think, Kaylan said, but I think one can never give up hope until the last moment. Don't worry, if you really want to become that kind of monster in the end, I will help you get rid of it. I hope you won't break your promise. That Dr. Mazi who just separated from us, Yvonne, you should have noticed his robotic arm, right? Kaylan said. Moju nodded and said, did he replace his arm with a cybernetic prosthesis to facilitate surgical operations in the wild? No, his original arm was infected by the cells of the seed of corrosion. When she heard the word seed of corrosion, Moju's expression changed very obviously. As a Hell paratrooper, she knew a lot of information. During her service, in the combat missions she participated in, most of the targets were members of heretical sects or settlements. Anyone who knows something about heretical sects and seeds of corrosion knows that being infected and parasitized by seeds of corrosion is an incurable disease in the true sense. Even though ARC has mastered the method of restraining the seeds of erosion, there is still no way to save those containers. The only thing they can do is to kill the container and the seeds of erosion in the container. Moju's commander also told her that if a comrade is accidentally infected during combat operations, they must be treated in time. As for the method of treatment, she can guess it without telling her. This thing is just like the zombie virus in the movie, but later in the movie, even if the protagonists are infected, they can always find serum or antidote or something like that. But in reality, the Institute has been studying the corrosion seeds for so long, but it has not been able to save any infected people. How long has he been infected? Moju couldn't help but ask. 2 years. However, the erosion seed cells in his body have been suppressed. In 2 years, there has been no change in the infection process, Kaylan said. The method of suppression was not discovered by people at the Institute, comes from the ruins of an Alpha civilization. We all thought he was certain to die at first, just like you are certain to die now. P.S. Thanks to book friend 2021992716375365 and book friend 2022051508534710 for the 100 starting coins. Readers, if you have time, please set a Chinese nickname. Sometimes when I want to thank you for a tip, I find that the ID is a long series of numbers, which is not only difficult to type but also difficult to remember, and it is difficult to leave any impression. In addition, some readers on QQ Reading Today said that the group they added before is gone. Now the new group account is in the one-click group adding function on the Kidian app. In order to prevent insiders, a 500 fan value is also set. The threshold, but I originally logged into my QQ Reading account and wanted to reply to that reader's result, but I found that there were sensitive words in my reply. At first I thought the sensitive words were join a group account or app, but after deleting it for a long time, I discovered that the word starting point was actually a sensitive word on QQ Reading. Everyone is owned by China Literature, so why bother? In addition, I still hope that if you can come to Kidian to support this book. The share ratio of Chidian.com is the highest for the author. It used to be 50-50, but now including full attendance benefits, the author can get almost 60% of the subscription. As for other channels, the further the channel is, the smaller the share ratio will be. I once knew a reader who gave him a reward of 1000 yuan through a very niche channel. It seemed to be a reading applet under a browser, and he used an Apple phone. As a result, he not only had to wait for it takes months to get the money, and the author has less than $100 left after $1,000. Just thinking about it is uncomfortable enough. PPS, I'm already writing an extra about ARC's special food. You can leave a message to tell me what your favorite food is and provide me with some inspiration. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 815. The 500th year of the new era. For the surviving humans on the Ark, this is the first year of their remaining lives. Although this result is much better than expected, at least, humans have not become extinct because of this. In January of the 499th year of the new era, shortly after the new year of the old calendar, the department responsible for conducting route observations discovered an anomaly. All pathfinding spacecraft and unmanned aerial vehicles sent by Ark lost contact, and there was no signal sent back to the Ark. Even if it was just a garbled code typed out in a hurry, there was nothing. The observation department immediately realized the seriousness of the problem. These pathfinding spacecraft and unmanned aerial vehicles are only 15 to 20 light seconds away from the Ark, which is not very far. If any accident occurs, even if the spacecraft crashes, at least the corresponding information can still be transmitted back. It is impossible for all spaceships and aircraft to disappear silently into the vast universe. The first reaction of the observation department is that they may have encountered a high-level alien civilization. These pathfinding spacecraft and unmanned aircraft are most likely destroyed or captured by alien civilization. Only in this case will they connect. I couldn't even utter a brief plea for help. But this report had just been submitted to the Joint Parliamentary Group, and the members were still on their way to the meeting, when something happened again. On the route directly in front of the Ark, an extremely abnormal gravitational field appeared. Under the influence of this gravitational field, the entire Ark began to gradually accelerate. According to calculations, this level of gravity requires at least a celestial body with a mass hundreds of times that of the Sun to exist within the observable range of optical equipment. But on the route directly in front of the Ark, not to mention stars, even stars, there are no small celestial bodies that can be seen everywhere in the universe. No. This space is really too clean, which is a very suspicious point. The leader of the observation department looked at the holographic star map on the table, and a drop of cold sweat couldn't help but fall from his forehead. As an experienced astronomer, the leader realized at this time that he had made an irreversible mistake. Black hole, he murmured, looking at the eyes looking at him in the control room. The reason why this space is so clean is because all celestial bodies are sucked in by the black hole, even light, the gravity that even light cannot escape. Those pathfinding spacecraft and unmanned aerial vehicles send without a wire signal. It is even more impossible to escape. But everything is too late. With the propulsion of the Ark, it is impossible to break free from the gravitational constraints of the black hole. Even if you abandon the ship and escape at this time, it is useless. The escaping spacecraft will also be dragged into the black hole by gravity. The entire Ark, including all the people on the Ark, has been captured by the black hole, and the rest is only a matter of time. The Joint Parliamentary Group concentrated all the computing power of the core mastermind, and finally came to a conclusion: there are only 3 months and 9 days left for Ark and mankind. Although the Joint Parliamentary Group decided to keep it secret from the public, paper could not cover the fire. In just over a month, everyone on the Ark knew the desperate fact: this ship was carrying the last seeds of human civilization, rushing towards the black hole. In less than 2 months, human civilization entered the most chaotic and darkest period in history. When the countdown to the end of the world enters, people who lose their minds can do any crazy thing. Even the army that maintains order no longer obeys the orders of their superiors. People who have not experienced that period of time can rely solely on video, and it is difficult to understand the despair and madness from written materials. According to official statistics, Ark lost more than 50% of its population when it passed through the wormhole, but in fact, 1/3 of the 50% of the population was lost in less than 2 months before entering the wormhole. The cowardly people commit suicide, the greedy people plunder wantonly, the violent people murder and set fire. Civilization seems to have lost its meaning, and people have turned into beasts, allowing their inner desires to dominate their actions. Of course, these things have passed. Most people never imagined that the Ark could actually successfully pass through the wormhole, even though the hull was severely damaged, the propellers completely lost power, and the ruined streets were filled with grotesque corpses that had been killed by abnormal space forces. But no matter, after all, the fire of human civilization is still preserved. The people who survived gradually woke up from that crazy state. They realized that the doomsday catastrophe was far away, but more serious survival problems were before all survivors. Although many areas inside the Ark are no longer inhabitable, thanks to the blessing of population decline, the relatively well-preserved areas can barely accommodate the 50% of survivors. After the problem of the living environment was solved, the food issue was placed at the top of the list. Since ancient times, food has been the most important thing for people. Only when people are full can they have the ability to think, work, and reproduce. However, more than 80% of the food production base on the Ark has been destroyed, and most of the food reserves were burned in those crazy 2 months. The output of the remaining 20% of the food production base cannot keep up with consumption, and the warehouse the food stocks are decreasing day by day at an alarming rate. However, Ark does not have sufficient resources to invest in the project to restore food production. This is not because food is not important, but because there are things with a higher priority than food: Ark's power and protection systems. Famine due to insufficient food is not a problem that cannot be solved at present. As long as the people above are cold-blooded enough, they can deal with the food shortage by further reducing the population. But if even the most basic living environment cannot be guaranteed, then everyone will die in this vast space. The top priority tasks are to restore the Ark's power system and repair the damaged main structure of the hull. As for restoring food production, it is ranked third. In this era, the only food an adult can get every day is synthetic rations equivalent to 600–800 calories, which are like flour and can be eaten after being washed with cold water and stirred into a batter. There is no seasoning. There are no side dishes, and a large amount of artificial cellulose is added to increase satiety. This cellulose is not digested by the human stomach and can be separated and used multiple times after the feces are collected. This thing is actually similar to the black bread mixed with sawdust that the Soviet Army ate during World War II. The only thing to eat with this synthetic ration was those colorful vitamin pills, and the supply of pills was also very tight. Scurvy, which had disappeared from human society for hundreds of years, became a disease of that era. One of the leading causes of death in humans. As for minors, the portion of food they receive is only half that of adults. Even a 17-year-old young man who is growing up still only receives 300–400 calories in food every day. Moreover, this standard is constantly being lowered as food reserves are dwindling. If you want to get more food, there is only one way: work. The jobs here only include those Ark repair projects that are ranked in the top 3 priorities. As for other jobs, although there is pay, the pay is pitifully low and cannot fill the hungry bellies of the young people. Lyndon is 16 years old this year and is a wormhole orphan. This novel title was only born in the 500th year of the new era. It refers specifically to those who have all their relatives died in various secondary disasters caused by traveling through black holes. Among them, he was the only child who survived. Like the protagonists of many tragic stories, Lyndon once had a happy family. His father was a senior engineer in the engineering department, his mother was a lecturer in a college, and he had a beautiful sister who was 20 years old. but he skipped 3 grades in a row during his business education and was admitted to an engineering college that was well known in the mechanical and electrical field at the age of only 15. But in the 499th year of the new era, everything changed. The first thing that happened was Lyndon's sister. On the first day of those 2 desperate months, her sister went out and never came back. My father had many connections, and he only saw her a week later at a garbage disposal station. My daughter's naked body. A month later, Lyndon's father was ordered to repair a stalled propeller. Although everyone knew that no matter whether the propeller could be repaired or not, the Ark would not be able to escape the fate of being swallowed by a black hole, but in order to prevent the family from losing protection and food, Lyndon's father still took over the task. Then, the thruster exploded and the entire maintenance team was wiped out. Fortunately, Ark did not break its promise and brought Lyndon and his mother to a safe area. Under the protection of soldiers who were still loyal to Ark, mother and son spent the past 2 months without any danger. When the Ark passed through the wormhole, everyone's consciousness stagnated for a long time. By the time Lyndon felt that the surrounding time and space had returned to normal, the Ark had arrived in a completely unfamiliar space. His mother, on the other hand, turned into a puddle of minced meat less than 3 meters away from him. The sadness did not last long, because the feeling of hunger was even more unbearable. Looking at the food rations getting less and less every day, Lyndon decided to participate in the repair work of the Ark, using work in exchange for enough food to satisfy his hunger. Relying on his own ability and knowledge, Lyndon stood out among the subjects and successfully got a job repairing thrusters, which reminded him of his father. During that period, he was completely I never thought that one day I would be able to inherit my father's legacy. This job is dangerous, and the damaged hull of the Ark is one of the biggest sources of danger, followed by the vacuum and radiation coming from outside the ship. On the first day of work, one worker was killed by a steel beam that suddenly broke and fell, and another worker was electrocuted by a high-voltage wire that touched the ground. On the second day of work, when Lyndon and the leader of the maintenance team pushed open a stuck hatch, they did not expect that the cabin behind the hatch was damaged and were sucked directly into space. The other 2 were he was exposed to a large amount of cosmic rays without wearing protective equipment and suffered from severe radiation sickness. On the third day of work, Lyndon got his first paycheck. Workers' wages are neither physical currency nor credits in their accounts, but food. In this era, food has once again become synonymous with hard currency. 6 packs of synthetic rations were packed in small bags. Each pack had a weight of 50 grams, but Lyndon knew without weighing that none of the packs was even enough. Packed in such packages, the white powder always reminded him of those scandalous illegal drugs in old-era movies. However, synthetic rations are not the highlight. Even though this job is so dangerous, the biggest reason why people still flock to it is the other 2 things in the reward: meat and vegetables. Of course, this meat is not meat in the real sense, but artificial meat synthesized from soy protein. Compared with the artificial meat produced before 499 in the new era, which is quite realistic, this batch of artificial meat tastes like dehydrated dried beans. It's the same, plus the extremely salty seasoning. In the past, it would have been garbage that couldn't be sold on the shelves. But now, it has become a treasure sought after by everyone. I heard from the team leader who died yesterday that outside, you only need a piece of artificial meat the size of your little finger to make a pretty young girl meet any of your requirements. But now that the piece of artificial meat in Lyndon's hand is enough, it's half the size of a palm. What is more precious than meat are vegetables. Even before the year 499 of the new era, vegetables have always been synonymous with luxury on the Ark. Whether it is soil culture or hydroponics, the cultivation of vegetables consumes a lot of precious space and resources. For the vast majority of people at the bottom, meat may still be available, but they may never have the opportunity to eat real vegetables once in their lives. Lyndon's previous family conditions were pretty good, and he could eat almost 1 meal of vegetables a day. Among the vegetables he has eaten, The most common ones are the ones he has now. Bean sprouts. Low cost, no need for additional fertilization, minimal environmental requirements other than sunlight, planting recommendations, rapid growth, and a very short maturity period. All of the above advantages combined, bean sprouts have simply become the most cost-effective vegetable during interstellar voyages. What Lyndon got now was a pack of raw bean sprouts, which weighed about 100 grams. He carefully stuffed the pack of raw bean sprouts into the inner pocket of his clothes, for fear of being seen. Bean sprouts can be eaten raw, but for some reason, he suddenly had the idea of cooking them. To be continued. P.S. I tried a side chapter with food, supplementary background settings, and some hidden clues on the side, a combination of the three elements. Although it is an extra chapter, it is actually in line with the current progress of the main plot of the main text. If you are not the kind of reader who reads 10 lines at a time, you should be able to read this chapter. Although the extra chapter is about food, there is still a lot of foreshadowing buried between the lines. As for this is considered digging holes or filling holes is a matter of opinion. Let me complain to myself, I say I want to write about food, but in the end the food-related pages only account for a very small part. Strictly speaking, it is not considered a food article at all. Another Ziki fan reader mentioned in a comment before that he was very interested in the plot of Arc Interstellar Voyage and hoped that I could write about it. But because the main plot takes place after the interstellar voyage, and according to my personal arrangements, the next new book is not a prequel to Alien Ruins Hunter, but a new worldview that has nothing to do with this book. Therefore, I can only satisfy this reader's wish with extra chapters. PPS Thank you Soap for the 1,500 starting coins that you can use to reward me. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 816. In this era, the word cooking can almost be equated with luxury. Food is scarce, and everyone can't fill their stomachs. In this environment, as long as they can find someone to eat, the first reaction of many people is to stuff it into their own stomachs before others find out. In the mouth, at least the taste and texture, that doesn't matter at all. As long as that thing satisfies hunger, that's enough. But on the Ark, finding food was difficult. If famine breaks out on the Earth, people can choose to go deep into the mountains and forests to find food, although it is dangerous to do so. No matter what, as long as there are living creatures, you will definitely find something to eat. But on this colonial ship, even if people dig deep, all they can see is metal and concrete. Almost all food sources are in the hands of the government and a few powerful private forces. A few months ago, there were still people selling dead rats skewered with steel drills on the black market, but now, even cockroaches are almost extinct on the Ark. People are almost ready to eat without exchanging their children. Before the disaster, although supplies were not abundant, they could at least keep most people fed and clothed. Many people miss their previous lives, but they also know in their hearts that they can no longer return to that kind of life. At least their generation will definitely never see the Ark return to what it was before. Lyndon held the bag of bean sprouts in his arms, lowered his head, and walked quickly through a narrow alley. At the entrance of the alley, there was an old man sitting with a sallow face and thin muscles. He had his eyes closed and his arms were drooped on both sides of his body, as if he was asleep. In front of the old man, there was an empty aluminum bowl filled with dents. When Lyndon got close to the old man, a disgusting smell of corpses suddenly penetrated his nose. Only then did he realize that the old man had been dead for a long time. Whether he died of starvation or some other cause of death, Lyndon did not know. No one came to collect the corpse, and the people in the sanitation department also couldn't get enough food. After completing their duties, these people just wanted to rest for a while, so as to reduce the consumption of calories as much as possible. This corpse, I'm afraid it won't be disposed of until it completely rots. Of course, It is also possible that some people who break through the bottom line will be secretly dragged away. Cannibals are no longer just stories that appear in urban legends. Just last month, the military executed a group of people arrested for mutilating and eating their own kind. The entire execution was watched on the screen. Those cannibals had their limbs tied with restraints and huddled on the ground. Their bloodshot eyes bulged outwards, their lips were covered with ulcers, and their loose hair obscured most of their faces. They didn't look like people, but the kind of people in horror novels who were hidden in dark sewers and were called, a monster called a ghoul. According to Ark's new laws, corpse eaters will be punished by death, regardless of whether the corpse was killed by a corpse eater or not. But under the pressure of hunger, some people will always choose to take risks. Lyndon no longer looked back at the old man's body, but chose to speed up his pace again. Half an hour later, he finally returned to his residence safely. After Ark came out of the wormhole, the original safe zones protected by the army were revoked, and Lyndon also moved to a shanty town in the East 4th District. The East 4th District was originally the superior area of Ark. The commercial streets and luxury residential areas here are worth every inch of land. Even with Lyndon's family situation before the disaster, they only lived in the East 6th District. Compared with the rent and land prices in the 6th District, the East 4th District is more than twice as expensive. But in the process of traveling through the wormhole, the entire East 6th District has completely turned into an unlivable dead place. According to the official budget, it will take at least 20 years to restore these dead places to their original habitable appearance. Time. Not to mention anything else, just repairing the damaged hull, removing radiation, and reconnecting the gas and water supply pipes and power lines will take a statistical unit of time of years. Not to mention that Ark now simply cannot devote so much resources and manpower to repairing a residential area that has little strategic value. The buildings in the East 4th District were also seriously damaged during the crossing, but at least the basic life support facilities were not greatly affected. There were no problems with the airtightness of the space and the oxygen supply. As for the power outage, it was not a big problem. More than 50 mobile searchlights are distributed at various street intersections in the East 4th District as lighting equipment. However, in order to save energy, these searchlights are only on for 1/3 of the day. In addition, most of the time residents of the East 4th District must survive in the dark. This shanty town was originally a high-end residential area located in a prime location, but all the valuable mansions were destroyed by the secondary disasters caused by the crossing, and no one was spared. The military used construction materials cleared from the ruins to build shacks in a rough manner to house refugees who had moved from other uninhabitable damaged areas. Lyndon checked the simple homemade lock on his door. After making sure there was no sign of prying, he took out the key from his pocket and opened the door lock. Then he put the lock on the other side of the door and locked the door. With a hint of excitement, he walked to the sleeping bag placed in the corner of the room, put his hand into the sleeping bag and groped for a while, and then took out a small package of transparent crystals wrapped in a plastic bag. This is an essential ingredient in every household's cooking before disaster strikes: salt. Now, the main way to obtain sodium and chloride is through small pills swallowed every day along with those dough-like synthetic foods. As for real salt, it has long become a luxury product that is as difficult to obtain as vegetables. Of course, Lyndon couldn't afford real table salt. These transparent crystals were actually sodium chloride that he extracted chemically from industrial raw materials for repairing ship hulls. In the old era, people often mistook industrial salt for table salt and were poisoned. However, in fact, the ingredients of industrial salt and table salt are completely different. The former is also called nitrite, and its main component is sodium chloride. There is also sodium nitrite. If it is pure sodium chloride, whether it is obtained through traditional salt-making processes or purified from industrial raw materials, it is actually edible. Lyndon used the crystallization method to separate sodium chloride. After initially waiting for the coarse salt to crystallize, he carried out several purifications. Although it was impossible to achieve a complete absence of any impurities, at least the toxicity was negligible. You don't need to use too much salt, just a little bit is enough to add freshness to the dishes. Although bean sprouts are simple, because there are so few types of vegetables that people can eat, this originally seemingly monotonous ingredient was almost made into flowers by the residents of the Ark before the disaster. As far as Lyndon's impression of his father is concerned, there have been at least 20 kinds of dishes cooked with bean sprouts as raw materials. But most of the dishes require wax and oil, and salt can be purified from stolen industrial raw materials, but he really has no way to do these two things. Based on the principle of using local materials, Lyndon decided to make two dishes that his father often cooked in the past: bean sprout pancakes and bean sprout soup. He found a metal cup that had been scorched black at the bottom, wrapped a wire around the edge of the cup, and hung it under a tripod about 30 centimeters high. This tripod was found in the ruins of his residential area. What was picked up was originally supposed to be an accessory for a certain model of camera, but the camera had already been picked up by people who rushed to scavenge, leaving only the somewhat deformed tripod lying among a pile of rubble. As for drinking water, he had plenty of it. The engineering team that Lyndon worked for had an enviable benefit, which included breakfast and lunch. Drinking water was naturally included in these two meals. Because the engineering team's work is very intensive, the supply of drinking water is also sufficient. Each person can draw at least 3,000 milliliters per day. As for the drinking water originally distributed to residents, he saved it. Lyndon carefully poured the clean water from the plastic bottle into the metal cup, and then added half of the bean sprouts and a pinch of salt. The fuel used was oblate solid alcohol, which he also got from the engineering team. The day after the team leader died in an accident, he took advantage of the fact that no one was available to take over the team leader's work in time and updated the material call form in time. A lot of small but very useful goodies were secretly brought back from the engineering team's warehouse. Lit the solid alcohol with a fire starter, and a bright fire suddenly rose in the originally dark shed. Although the temperature did not change much, it still made Lyndon feel a little warm. In addition to the power supply, the East 4th District was damaged. Outside the lines, the temperature control facilities have also stopped working. The outdoor temperature remains around 5 degrees Celsius all year round, and the indoor temperature is barely 10 degrees Celsius. Fine bubbles began to emerge from the bottom of the metal cup, and Lyndon vaguely felt like he smelled a long-lost fragrance. Maybe it's an illusion. He rubbed the wings of his nose. Bean sprouts boiled in plain water, how could they smell fragrant? Lyndon smiled self-deprecatingly, and then took out a dented aluminum bowl from his coat pocket. This was the bowl placed in front of the old man's body, but the old man could no longer use the bowl, so Lyndon brought it back. The aluminum bowl is very thin. It is called a bowl, but it is actually a disposable container made of aluminum foil and used to hold cooked food. The old man probably picked it up from some ruins, but judging from the thin layer of dust accumulated on the aluminum bowl, it probably hadn't held food for a long time. Lyndon wiped the aluminum bowl clean, cut one side of it, and flattened it into a piece of aluminum foil. He didn't have a pot, but it was enough to use this aluminum foil as a pancake cooker. In the past, Lyndon's father used an electric baking pan that could clamp the dough, but now, Lyndon has neither an electric baking pan nor electricity. He took out a bag of synthetic rations, added a little water to it, and then slowly stirred it with his fingers until the white powder and water were completely combined and turned into a sticky dough. According to the way most people eat, it is ready to eat at this time, but if too much water is added, it will be more difficult to swallow. Generally, the batter is diluted and eaten as porridge. But for Lyndon, he thought the water was a bit too much. He had only seen his father do it before, but this was his first time doing it in practice. Looking at the soft dough in the bag, he thought for a moment, took out a clean piece of clothing, poured the dough on it, and then wrapped the clothing tightly. The excess moisture was quickly filtered out from the holes in the clothing fibers. Looking at the dough with at least half the moisture content, Lyndon nodded with satisfaction. The main component of this synthetic ration is actually starch. Although it is not as easy to process into various pasta as flour, it can still be shaped as long as the proportion of water is controlled. Lyndon kneaded the remaining half of the bean sprouts into the dough, added an appropriate amount of salt, rolled the dough into a ball, flattened it, wrapped the bread with aluminum foil, and then sandwiched it between the burning solid above the alcohol. Let the flames lick the surface of the aluminum foil again and again. An alluring scent emanated from the cracks in the aluminum foil, and this time Lyndon could finally confirm that this was not his hallucination, but the real scent captured by his olfactory organs. How long has it been since you smelled the aroma of food? After the ark traveled through the wormhole? No, to be precise, it should be that after his father passed away and he and his mother moved into a safe zone protected by the military, they have never had cooked food again. At that time, the daily food was compressed biscuits, and the soap-like taste was still fresh in Lyndon's memory. However, now even compressed biscuits have become a popular delicacy. Just in the East 4th District, a soldier was attacked by civilians last week. He was hit in the back of the head with a brick and died directly, and the reason for the attack was simply because he was holding a cardboard box with compressed biscuits printed on it. However, the attackers did not find food in the cardboard box. The cardboard box contained a pile of documents, which was important information rescued from the ruined building. Before the disappointed attacker could vent his anger on these documents, he was shot dead by the soldiers who came to support him, and the video in the news broadcast ended abruptly. The smell of pancakes became stronger and stronger, and Lyndon's abdomen began to make a gurgling sound. He couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. At this moment, there was a sudden banging sound outside the shack door. "Is there anyone inside?" "Open the door quickly," an impatient male voice shouted outside the door. Lyndon's hand shook, and the dough wrapped in aluminum foil fell onto the solid alcohol, and the flames were immediately extinguished. P.S. This extra chapter ends here, leaving an open ending. Everyone can rely on their own imagination and the background of that era to guess the direction of the plot. As for the real ending, history will never record the story of an insignificant person. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 817. The only thing you need to pay attention to now is one thing, Kaylan continued to say to Emoju. Don't let yourself fall asleep, focus on it at all times, and it's best not to even get distracted. Why? Emoju asked. I'm afraid that you might be in a trance and hear the whispers that Rooney described, or simply see the starry sky directly. Then with your ability to resist erosion, I'm afraid you'll turn into a monster in minutes. While explaining, Kaylan took out a large amount of psychotropic drugs from his backpack and gave them to Emoju. When necessary, you can rely on the help of drugs, although the side effects of excessive use of this drug will be uncomfortable. You must stay awake until we reach the core of the grey mist forest. Got it. Emoju took the medicines and stuffed them one by one into the equipment around his waist for easy access at any time. Your current situation is quite stable. Kaylan glanced at the tentacles growing out of Emoju's forehead. There was no sign of continuing to grow or expand. Try not to think about the things you just heard in the recording. Erosion. The process should slow down. It's okay if you don't say it. Once you say it, I can't help but go back and think. There was a helpless expression on Emoju's face. This is like a classic psychology game. The host said to the players participating in the game, in the next 10 seconds, please do not think about an elephant in your mind, and the players who heard the sentence, basically the first thing that comes to mind is an elephant. Fortunately, at least the tentacles on the head have not grown longer. As for whether other parts of the body have mutated, I don't know. Kaylan shrugged. You can find a clean cabin and take off all the equipment to check it yourself. Of course, if you don't mind, I can help too. No need, Emoju said with a straight face. If this erosion will be due to deepening of cognition, regardless of whether the body has mutated or not, the best way to deal with it is to turn a blind eye, right? That makes sense. Hey, why do you seem to have suddenly become smarter? Could it be that the structure of your brain has also mutated? Kaylan joked. The originally solemn atmosphere suddenly became much more relaxed. Moju glared at Kaylan, and then asked, then what should we do now? Should we stay here to search for clues, or should we move on? Moju originally wanted to find the other people who were separated, but she soon realized that this option was not reliable. Looking for someone in the grey mist forest will only lead to losing yourself. On the contrary, if everyone sets a common goal, such as the core area of the forest, they may meet at the terminal. Of course, the premise is that they have to cross the last 10 kilometers alone. I want to ask this AI something more, well, but you'd better avoid it. If you hear something you shouldn't hear, your erosion may be further deepened, Kaylan said. Okay, but where should I go? Moju looked around and asked. The interior of the wreckage of the Shaojiangkai frigate has been filled with grey fog at this time. Only the area near Kaylan has not been invaded by the grey fog under the influence of Ze Logo's space power. If Moju is allowed to leave this area at this time, in the open space, if he entered the grey fog, even inside the battleship, he would probably lose his way. As for losing consciousness and entering a sleepwalking state like just now, it may happen again. The safest direction is to ensure that Moju is always within Ian's sight. There is no other way, so we can only use the ground as a prison. Kaylan sighed. Draw the ground as a prison? Moju was stunned for a moment. What do you mean? That's it. Kaylan waved his hand, and a small space barrier that could isolate sight and sound in one direction immediately enveloped Moju. What's going on? What's going on? Why can't I see anything? Moju's somewhat frightened voice came out from the one-way sound transmission barrier. She tried to take a step forward, but she was directly bumped into on top of the space barrier as hard as a wall. It's a small dark room that I created with Ze Logo's ability. I ask you to stay in it for a while. When I finish asking the AI what I want to know, I will let you out. Kaylan said this after a few words. The sound isolation of the little dark room was restored again. After hearing Ian's voice, Moju immediately calmed down. Although it felt uncomfortable to be locked in the little dark room, she also knew that Kaylan was trying to save her. Through the one-way light transmitting space barrier, Kaylan could see Moju slowly sitting down with her back against the barrier behind her. She subconsciously reached out to touch the tentacles on her forehead, but she seemed to remember something. His whole body trembled slightly and he retracted his hand. Kaylan knew that although she had been comforting Moju just now, the actual chance of Moju surviving was very low. She was not a 1 in a million person like Rooney, who had extremely strong resistance to erosion. Otherwise, your body wouldn't have mutated after listening to a few recordings that didn't feature the key points at all. Moju should know this very well. When she was face to face with Kaylan, she pretended to be indifferent, but now after being locked in the dark room, her expression suddenly changed. Despair, frustration, helplessness. Through the barrier of one-way vision, the emotions expressed by Moju were all seen in Ian's eyes. But there was nothing Kaylan could do. The source of this erosion was an existence that even he couldn't touch. No, it can't be said to be touching. Even looking at each other for a moment is enough to make Ian's entire body and mind collapse. I still have some questions, and I hope you can answer them truthfully. Kaylan stopped looking at Moju in the little black room, turned to look at the virtual screen in front of him, and said to the AI of the central control computer. You have the highest authority of ARC and can access all data in the central control computer of this ship. AI replied. A single member of the undead crew may be restricted in accessing the ARC's core mastermind, but lower-level terminals such as the battleship's central control computer can still be fully controlled. Okay, first organize the information in your database into a table. If there is a date, it must be marked with a date. Any information that mentions the gray mist forest or contains keywords such as secrets, truth, despair, mutation, whispers, etc., will be marked in red. Make it bold and scroll the completed form on the screen as quickly as possible, Kaylan ordered. Although a lot of data stored in the central control computer is damaged, a supercomputer like this, which occupies an area as large as a mansion, only leaves some data fragments in the calculations, and the amount of information it contains is definitely comparable. Above is a vast sea. Even though Kaylan can browse at extremely fast speeds with his photographic memory and constant assistance, his digestion speed is still too slow compared to the huge amount of data. Densely packed characters scrolled on the projection screen at a speed that was impossible for ordinary people to see clearly. According to the time calculated by the central control computer, at this speed, it would take at least 40 hours for Kaylan to read the entire content. Moreover, this is not the data itself, but the title table that has been summarized and organized. If you click on each row of characters, there will be root directories one after another. Make it faster. Make the font smaller, Kaylan said. With Zelogo's help, there is almost no limit to his time stop ability, and the mental consumption and side effects can be completely ignored. However, there is a limit to the ability of human eyes to receive and process information. No matter how fast the brain operates, it means nothing if the eyes cannot keep up. Kaylan suddenly felt envious of the characters in those cyberpunk works. With the help of the brain-computer interface, the speed at which they absorbed information could be compared to the data transmission speed of the computer, although the current cybernetic meaning of ARC body technology has not yet been extended to the brain level, and the only practical application is simple brain modification that connects sensory nerves and motor nerves. However, in the Research Institute, experiments on brain-computer interfaces have been carried out many times. There are many experimental subjects equipped with brain-computer structures, and most of their brains have been cyborgized, lying in the freezers of underground ice houses. There are men and women, old and young. This technology is being promoted to the entire human society. It's just a matter of time. However, the brain-computer interface also has a fatal problem. Like computers and network services, the former will crash if its computing intensity exceeds its limit, and the latter will be equivalent to a DDoS attack if a large amount of data is input in a short period of time, and the human brain, if too much data is accepted, it will also be burned. Biological synapses are much more fragile than silicon chips, although they have the ability to regenerate. Once damaged, the impact on the brain is completely irreversible. Even if you can save your life, there will be some unavoidable mental problems. Defects. The brain is an extremely sophisticated device. Even if human civilization has developed to this stage, it has not been able to create anything more sophisticated and magical than the brain. Therefore, whether operating or repairing the brain, one must be cautious. This is probably why, although brain-computer interface technology has matured, it has not been widely popularized. Those cyberpunk works are still science fiction works in the final analysis, with a certain degree of fantasy. As long as humans cannot fully analyze the structure of the brain, black technology such as brain-computer interfaces will not be popularized. The characters on the projection screen were scrolling faster than a top-end sports car with full power. Kaylan started and stopped almost every tenth of a millisecond. Even with Zelogo's assistance, the look in his eyes was still revealed. There was a hint of fatigue. It's not that Kaylan's mental power has been exhausted, but reading a large amount of meaningless information for a long time has made his mind feel an instinctive aversion. It's like eating synthetic rations that taste like chewing wax all the time. It's okay to eat once or twice, because life forces you to eat every meal. But if people keep stuffing this thing into their mouths for 24 hours, then even the champion of the big eater competition will probably feelings of nausea and vomiting may also occur quickly. But in order not to miss any clues, Kaylan had to check all the data, no matter how detailed it was. As for the entries marked in red and bold, he had to click on the root directories of the next level and read them all. If Emoju could see the outside scene through the dark space barrier in front of her at this time, she would be surprised to find that a stream of white steam was rising from Ian's head. At the same time, deep in the gray fog forest, an unknown location. Asano Akira opened his eyes suddenly. He had a very strange feeling in his heart, even though his memory told him that he had just retreated from the wreckage of the battleship into the fog a second ago. He always felt that something seemed to be missing in the middle. It's like watching a movie. Although the editing and connection before and after a long shot are so perfect that you can hardly see any traces, some people who are very keen on this can still detect slight gaps. For example, the angle of view is as small as a shift of less than 0.5 degrees, such as minimal changes in focus and lighting, or an image gap of only one frame and image misalignment of a few pixels. Akira Asano is such a person. After awakening this ability, his perception of the world is completely different from ordinary people. Even if his memory is deleted, he can detect abnormalities faster than ordinary people. Just when Asano Akira was confused, his sword suddenly buzzed in the scabbard, and the blade trembled crazily, as if it wanted to bounce out of the scabbard on its own. Asano Akira stretched out his hand to hold the handle of the sword, and the beating sword instantly calmed down. He pulled out the knife, placed the blade gently on his palm, held his breath, and stood quietly in place for a few seconds. I left the team. Cut off the safety rope. Walked alone in the gray mist forest for 2 hours, Asano Akira frowned. In his memory, there was no record related to it. But he was completely convinced of the information Jean Deo told him. This knife had already become a part of his extended consciousness. Under the long-term infiltration of substantial thought power, Jean Deo was almost as good as Asano Akira. The mind is connected. To put it in more fantasy terms, it means that a weapon spirit is about to be born. Moreover, this information also proves that Asano Akira's strange feeling just now was definitely not his illusion. It's all true. Then I should look for Kaylan and the others now? No. I can't find them, and they can't find me. Instead of wandering in the forest, it's better to set the original endpoint as the destination. As long as I can reach the core area, I can meet up with Kaylan and the others, Asano Akira thought to himself. P.S. Thanks to the Reading Giraffe for the 1,500 starting coins, thanks to Xiaojia Erlang for the 500 starting coins, thank you to Wangmaxi Bustion for the 300 starting coins, thank you for the 100 starting coins for the reward all day long. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 818. Then, there is only one question left before Asano Akira: how can he find the right direction in the gray fog forest and head to the core area? Akira Asano thought for a moment, then slightly arched his body, held the scabbard with one hand, and held the handle of the knife with the other hand. After a short period of energy accumulation, he executed a 360-degree swing with the sword. Although the blade of the Nino alloy sword is only about 1 meter long, the range of the circular sword energy it cuts out far exceeds this length, and even the thick gray fog is cut in an instant. The spreading ring sword energy quickly swept across a circular area with a radius of about 20 meters, with Asano Akira's standing position as the center. 2 seconds later, all the main trunks and pillar roots of the fog perches in this circular area where a broken mark appeared 1 meter above the ground, as if the picture was out of place. Then, the upper tree trunks fell to the outside of the circle along this broken mark, leaving tree stumps with smooth mirror-like cross-sections. Although Emoju said that in the depths of the gray fog forest, it is no longer possible to determine the direction by identifying the density of annual rings, but the reason why she said this is only because the equipment carried by the loggers does not have such high detection capabilities. Accuracy. For Asano Akira, he does not need to care about the density of the annual rings of the fog perch. He only needs to judge the wood on which side of the fog perch by the resistance feedback when the sword energy cuts through these trunks and pillar roots. Closer. The invisible ring-shaped sword energy is also connected to Asano Akira's mental tentacles. Since the mental tentacles cannot penetrate the thick fog, it only needs to cut the thick fog open. With the abnormally precise perception ability of his mind tentacles, Asano Akira can feel even if the tightness of the wood of the two fog perches is only 1/10,000,000% off. Asano Akira quickly locked the direction. The wood of the fog tree located at 6 o'clock is the densest, while the wood of the fog tree located at the opposite 12 o'clock direction is the loosest in this circular area. Of course, this looseness is only considerable, and the actual difference is very small. It is estimated that only the valuable precision instruments in the research institute can measure this error. As for the vernier caliper-like tool used by those lumberjacks, it is nothing more than a fire stick in this place. Akira Asano turned around and walked towards the original 6 o'clock direction. The wood density of the mist perches there is the highest, so it must be the direction leading to deeper depths. But before Asano Akira could walk 50 steps, a strange feeling came over him again. He stood still, took a deep breath, and drew his sword again. Once again, all the fog perches in a circular area were cut off, but Asano Akira, who was standing in the center of the circular area, couldn't help but frown. At this position, the root of the pillar with the densest wood of the fog perch is not directly in front, but about 120 degrees to the back and right, which is almost the 4 o'clock position. He was sure that what he had just walked had been a straight line. When people with normal vision walk in environments such as dense fog and dense forests, they can easily walk in circles because they have no reliable line of sight reference. This is because the strength on both sides of most people's limbs is not exactly the same. Generally speaking, the right limb is the dominant side of a person, left-handers are the left side, and the right limb can get more use and exercise in daily life. Therefore, the strength of both the right arm and the right leg is greater than that of the left side of the body. During normal walking, the force exerted by the right leg is stronger than that of the left leg, which causes the body to deviate toward the left-hand side every time a step is taken. In places with obvious reference objects, the human brain will adjust this deviation on its own. However, if there is no reference object and you walk blindly with your eyes completely closed, the final trajectory will most likely be a counterclockwise circle. But Asano Akira was originally blind. When he was unable to release the tentacles of his thoughts outside his body, he was able to walk normally without relying on assistive tools entirely because of his strong sense of balance and stability, even without the ability to materialize his thoughts. Akira Asano's sense of balance is also much stronger than that of normal people. The human brain has a certain functional compensation mechanism. Deaf people often have good vision, while blind people have sharper hearing and touch. This is certainly related to daily life habits, but when humans lose some kind of function for a long time, when the sensory abilities are enhanced, the cerebral cortex will compensate this unused space to modules belonging to other sensory abilities. This is not some pseudoscience from street stall literature, but is based on authoritative medical papers. In a sense, the experimental subjects of the Human Psychodynamic Research Project like Asano Akira and others are also a disguised compensatory mechanism. While gaining superpowers, they will also lose part of their original body functions. The more abilities you gain, the more you lose, and the price of becoming a perfect individual like Marshall is to lose your own life. When Keilan and the others met Asano Akira for the first time, his power of mind could only be attached to the sword, but he could still move freely in the ruins even though he was blind, which was already very good. Illustrates this point. But this time, Asano Akira unexpectedly went astray. He couldn't see the surrounding scene, and he didn't release the tentacles of his mind to sense the surrounding environment. Logically speaking, the thick fog should not pose any obstacle to his perception. He only needed to keep moving forward according to his usual walking method. Just go. But he still went astray. What Asano Akira couldn't understand the most was that even if ordinary people were walking in circles because they were disoriented, they would have to walk a long distance before the trajectory would appear in an arc shape. However, he only took a full 47 steps, and he was supposed to be at the correct direction of 12 o'clock. Directly in front has moved to the 4 o'clock position on the back right side, which is a full 120 degrees. If you take a few steps forward, you will probably have to turn 180 degrees. After a 10-degree turn, I started walking back. To draw a movement trajectory close to a semicircle in such a short distance, Asano Akira's deviation angle at each step must be extremely exaggerated. He took 2 steps back and placed his feet over the footprints he had just made. He took another 2 steps back and stepped on the pair of footprints left a moment earlier. There is almost no angular deviation between the 2 pairs of footprints, at least not one that can be observed with the naked eye. Moving forward in this way, it is impossible to turn 120 degrees in just 47 steps. It seems, it's not that simple. Asano Akira did not feel discouraged. His mentality had always remained Gujing Muibo state. This was the same when facing strong enemies and the same when facing death. But for a while, Asano Akira couldn't think of a way to deal with it. In the end, he could only choose an extremely inefficient and stupid method: cut the tree stump every 3 steps to redetermine the direction. As thin pieces of wood were cut off from the tree stump one after another, Asano Akira walked forward step by step. The food and oxygen concentrators he carried were not much, and they were only enough to last for 2 days. However, at his current speed, 2 days was enough to cover the last 10 kilometers. As long as nothing happens. Just when Asano Akira was thinking this, a strong sense of crisis suddenly hit his heart. This is not information captured by the tentacles of consciousness. His tentacles of consciousness can only be released for a short moment when the sword energy cuts through the thick fog, and then they will be swallowed up by the closing fog in an instant, and this for the perception of danger comes entirely from the instinct of a warrior. Asano Akira squatted on the spot, took out the sharp blade in his hand from under his ribs, and tilted it behind him. No sound came from the thick fog, but he felt that the blade touched something hard and sharp. It was the blade of another knife. And judging from the power fed back from the sword, the style of the weapon used by the attacker, and even the force and speed of the sword, were almost the same as his own. The enemy is also a swordsman. A trace of doubt flashed in Asano Akira's heart. In the exploration team, apart from Akira Asano, the only remaining members who can be considered to have strong close combat abilities are K-Lan and Ze Luo, but the former's favorite melee weapons are engineer shovels and hunting knives. The latter simply disdains the use of weapons. As for 33, although his abilities are somewhat difficult to guard against, Akira Asano has had several point-to-point sparring sessions with him in private. Although those black flying blades are difficult to fight, the power attached to a single flying blade is very powerful. Asano Akira is not that strong. He only needs to wave lightly to fight, and he can fly away the flying blades or daggers that are coming at him. If 33 wants to suppress Asano Akira, head-on confrontation will never work. His only chance of winning depends on the number and flexibility of the flying blades. He attacks Asano Akira from multiple directions and angles at the same time, waiting for opportunities to find Asano Akira. A breach in defense. But unfortunately, the gap in hard power between the two is really big. Even if there is a flaw in Asano Akira's defense, it will be difficult for Sanzan-san to catch it. The two competed 8 times in total. Asano Akira won 8 times and Sanzan lost 8 times. But the only thing that gave 33 some comfort was that the 8th time he persisted was twice as long as the first time, from 6 seconds to 12 seconds. With 33's strength, even if he were to sneak attack Asano Akira who was unprepared, it would be difficult to succeed, and it would be impossible for Asano Akira to have such a strong sense of crisis. As for the remaining Ivan, Emoju, and Valentina in the exploration team, the combat effectiveness of the first 2 people in this exploration team is basically negligible, while Valentina does not use the blasphemer mecha. Even a little weaker than Emoju. In other words, the attacker was definitely not someone else from the exploration team. If it's not them, it's the enemy. Asano Akira breathed a sigh of relief, and the blade suddenly shook outward, deflecting the opponent's weapon. At the same time, he also relied on the force of the rebound to retract the sword. At the same time, with his knees as the center of the circle, he completed a 180-degree turn in a half-kneeling posture. The retracted sword was swung out again, a reverse Cossack slash from the bottom up. If the opponent is also a sword-wielding samurai, then when the weapon was blown away, there will be an obvious empty door in the middle and lower part of the body, and Asano Akira's reverse Kazaya slash with a tricky angle is aimed at this empty door. And go. If it hits, even if it is not fatal, it can cut open the opponent's abdomen and cause a huge amount of bleeding. Not to mention that Asano Akira's blade still has sword energy that is enough to cut through thick fog. Clang. Asano Akira seemed to hear the sound of gold and iron clashing along the hilt of the sword, and it seemed to be just his imagination, but regardless of whether he heard the collision or not, this reverse Cossack slash was indeed struck by the opponent. After being blocked, the two sharp blades collided together again. Not only was the Nino alloy sword blocked, but even the sword energy emanating from the blade disappeared without a trace in an instant. The opponent's reaction speed is not inferior to mine, Akira Asano judged in his heart. He did not choose to step forward to get into close combat distance. Instead, he drew the knife and jumped back, then quickly extended the tip of the knife forward and made a thrusting movement. The area of the sword tip is much smaller than the blade. Without a shield, it is impossible to block the thrust with a weapon. There are only 3 strategies to deal with it: hit the top of the thrust weapon to push it down, or pick it up in another direction, or just ignore the thrust and trade lives with the opponent. Lunging is a sword move that has no defensive capabilities. Whether it is retracting the attack or changing the move, it is more difficult than other sword moves. When 2 professional swordsmen compete, few people will use the thrusting attack method. There is no other reason for this. The opponent only needs to press down or push away the thrusting sword to launch a counterattack. However, the swordsman who uses thrusting will have a more or less moment when the weapon in his hand is pressed down or pushed away. Lost balance. A momentary loss of balance can result in permanent loss of life. But Asano Akira is confident that even if the middle part of the sword is hit hard, the tip of his sword will not move half an inch. What's more, with his thrusting speed, before the opponent's weapon hits the sword, the tip of the sword had already penetrated the opponent's body. Ding! However, the expected power does not come from anywhere on the blade or spine, but from the tip with the smallest force-bearing area. The opponent withstood the tip of the Nino alloy sword. Moreover, from the tip of the knife, Asano Akira could feel the unparalleled, almost vigorous sword intent. The opponent actually used the tip of the knife, not a shield or something like that. This is completely a sharp contrast. What's going on? Asano Akira's inner doubts aggravated again. He increased his strength a bit and tried to move the tip of the knife away, but the sword still remained motionless and it was difficult to advance even a little bit. P.S. Thanks to Anthony Bigwood for the 300 starting coins, thanks to Wang Chuanhe for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chenmi-san. Chapter 819. In this situation, Asano Akira couldn't choose to retreat or change his moves like he just did. Once he removed the power from the tip of the knife, it would be the opponent's turn to thrust through his body. Tit-for-tat moves, whoever retreats first will lose. But just when Asano Akira was about to hold back no longer and explode all his power, the unshakable power coming from the tip of the knife suddenly disappeared. Although I don't know why the opponent chose to retreat, this was obviously a rare opportunity. Asano Akira had no reason to give up. He stabbed the sword forward, and an almost solid sword energy erupted from the tip of the sword. But Asano Akira didn't feel the sense of breakthrough when the sharp blade pierced his body, and the surging sword energy was completely thrown away. The swordsman who was confronting him just a moment ago seemed to have disappeared out of thin air. Same, there is nothing behind the thick fog. Immediately afterwards, a stronger sense of crisis completely enveloped his whole person. Behind, no, not only the back, the left and right sides, but also the top of the head. There were 8 directions in total, with 8 sharp killing intents heading towards Asano Akira. Attack. There are more than one enemy. Asano Akira felt that the hairs on his back suddenly stood up. He was accustomed to keeping silent and let out a low roar in his throat. He forcibly twisted his body, holding the knife in one hand and the sheath in the other, using the double knife flow to perform a reverse circumcision. Swinging to both sides. He could feel the sharp tearing pain coming from the muscles of his arms, back and abdomen, but the movement of swinging the knife did not undergo any deformation. At the critical moment, he still successfully blocked the sharp blade stabbing from 8 directions. But the moment Asano Akira completed this extreme defense, the 9th killing intent suddenly burst out from under his feet and headed straight for his left rib. The short period of exhaustion and time to adjust his breathing when he retracted the move left him no time to defend against the killer move hidden at the end. He could only let the sharp blade pierce under his ribs, pierce through his heart, and then emerge from his throat. I lost. Is this my end? It seems that death is not so painful. I don't know how long it took for Asano Akira to wake up from his coma. His body twitched a few times and slowly regained consciousness. However, wherever his thoughts touched, it was completely bright red. His throat felt like it was being strangled by something, making it extremely difficult to breathe. There was a constant burning sensation in the lungs and trachea, as if he had swallowed a mouthful of hot molten iron, and the burning sensation almost came out of his chest. I can still feel pain. I'm not dead? Cough cough cough. Asano Akira suddenly trembled, his body that had been lying flat on the ground suddenly curled up, and he coughed violently. He turned over with some difficulty, supported the ground with his elbows and knees, and took a deep breath. The air smelled very sour, with the sour smell of the residue after the complete reaction of the oxygen generator, and the oxygen content in it was extremely low, which could not relieve the burning sensation in the respiratory tract at all. Asano Akira calmed down. It was only then that he realized that the bright red he had seen with his mind tentacles was actually a warning message on the screen inside the breathing mask. However, when he woke up just now, his brain was still in a semi-downtime state. Only when you are in such a state will you feel that the whole world is filled with blood. Warning, the oxygen generator is exhausted, please replace it in time. Warning, the remaining oxygen content is less than 15%, dangerous. Warning, the remaining oxygen content is less than 5%, dangerous. Warning, remaining oxygen content is less than 1%. Asano Akira quickly took out a new can of oxygen generator from his backpack and put it in, and poured a quick-acting catalyst into the can. The bright red oxygen content number inside the mask began to rise. In just 5 seconds, it had already changed from red to yellow, and then to green, which represents safety. Asano Akira took several deep breaths, and the burning sensation in his respiratory tract finally eased somewhat. He couldn't help but feel a little lucky. If he had woken up just a few minutes later, he might never have been able to wake up. It was just a little bit away from death from suffocation. After his condition recovered a little, Asano Akira's originally extremely confused thinking due to coma and hypoxia gradually calmed down, and he soon realized something was wrong. He clearly remembered that before he fell into coma, his left rib was pierced by a sharp blade, which penetrated his throat and heart at the same time. Logically speaking, he could not still be alive. But now, apart from some burning sensation still remaining in the trachea and lungs, there was no pain in the throat, chest, or under the ribs. He reached out to touch the protective suit on his left rib and found no damage. Place. Asano Akira sat cross-legged, lost in thought. Could it be that everything just now was still an illusion? But the collision feeling from the sword was so real, and the killing intent wrapped in those sharp blades, even at that time, I knew that these things were all illusions. I would still choose to block instead of letting them go. The sword of falsehood pierces the body. This illusion was so real that it blurred the boundary between illusion and reality. Akira Asano couldn't tell whether there was a real one hidden among those fake swords. Is this dense fog causing trouble? Asano Akira stretched out his palm and gently moved it. Through the thin and tough gloves, he could feel something flowing between them, which was as solid as liquid. Mist, being in it, is more like being in a container filled with low-density liquid. However, even if the gray mist forest can create bewildering hallucinations, the murderous intention is real. Looking back now, Asano Akira can't help but tighten the muscles in his body, and his fingers will curl up unconsciously, subconsciously. I just want to hold the handle of the knife. Wait, where's the knife? He was startled and hurriedly reached out to touch the ground around him, but he didn't touch anything. If he had just fallen into a coma due to hallucinations, the sword should have fallen not far from him, but apart from the soil. What Asano Akira touched was only tiny gravels and gravel embedded in the soil. He can no longer feel his knife. The connection with the tentacles of consciousness is broken. Akira Asano had never felt so panicked, even at the moment when he mistakenly thought he was about to die. As long as he held the knife in his hand, his mood was calm. But after losing the fighting weapon that had been accompanying him, it was difficult for him to calm down. He wanted to expand the search area, but he was afraid of losing his way again. If he stayed where he was, the sword might fall just a few steps away from him, but once he took a step, he might just go farther and farther. Then he might never be able to get his knife back. Asano Akira's breathing became a little faster, and the real-time heart rate displayed on the breathing mask rose from 80 beats per minute to 120 beats per minute, and it continued to increase gradually. I must find it, I must find it. Asano Akira thought silently in his heart. He is not like a swordsman who has lost a weapon, but more like a child who has lost a close relative. In a daze, he seemed to feel that the density of the fog around him had dropped. A few rays of light shone through the gaps in the canopy of the tree canopy. He could even see with the tentacles of his mind some distance about 100 meters away from him. 10 meters away, there was a tree stump with a cross-section as smooth as a mirror. That was what he had cut out just now when he was confirming the direction. Just like a blindfolded person whose blindfold was suddenly torn off, the moment Asano Akira's mind tentacles extended around, he had returned to light. The visibility has increased. Asano Akira was full of doubts. This should be the depths of the forest, but the visibility is almost the same as the area outside the red line. This change made him couldn't help but be more vigilant, but his eagerness to find the knife made him not carefully observe the surrounding environment at the first time, but focused on the ground. The tentacles of his thoughts were like his sight, caressing the surrounding ground inch by inch. The soil here is not very hard, and there are still a lot of footprints on it. Asano Akira can identify that these footprints belong to him, and there are no other people's footprints at the scene. As for the sword that broke through the ground, it was completely an illusion. In other words, he had been fighting with air for a long time just now. But he still couldn't find his knife. He remembered that when he fell, he was holding the handle of the knife tightly in his hand. Even if he finally let go, he probably wouldn't have fallen too far. It can be seen that within a radius of 10 meters from where Asano Akira is standing, there is no trace of the Nino alloy sword. Could it be that I threw the knife out, but my memory was confused? Akira Asano supported his forehead. No. I couldn't have thrown the knife away, especially in this place. If I let go, I would lose the connection with it, and I wouldn't do that. The only possibility is that someone, or something picked up my knife when I was unconscious. Akira Asano glanced at the only man-made object on the ground, the empty oxygen concentrator bottle he had replaced. According to his daily consumption rate, a standard bottle of oxygen concentrator should be able to last about 6 to 8 hours. Just before he fell into the hallucinatory battle, Asano Akira had just replaced a new bottle of oxygen generator, and the empty bottles he replaced were inserted into the mesh pocket on the side of his backpack. Each bottle of oxygen generator has an independent number, so there is no chance of confusion or misremembering. In other words, changing the oxygen generator is a real thing that happens in reality, not an illusion. Based on this calculation, his coma should be at least 6 to 8 hours. But the problem is, the time on the watch has only passed less than half an hour. He leaned over and picked up the empty oxygen generator tank on the ground, inspected it carefully, and then inspected the entire respiratory mask including the pump, air pressure valve and other components, and found no damage. So there is no possibility of air leakage. What happened when I was in a coma? Why did the consumption of oxygen concentrators increase so much? Wait. No, that's not right, you can't trust the time on the watch. Asano Akira seemed to have remembered something and suddenly broke into a cold sweat. When he separated from Keilan and the others, it only lasted a few seconds in his memory. Although he could feel the strange feeling of being vaguely edited, in the process of recalling the memory, could not find any obvious bug, and even the time on the watch told him that only a few seconds had passed since he and Keilan retreated into the thick fog. But Asano Akira's knife told him that he took the initiative to cut off the safety rope on his body and walked alone in the thick fog for nearly 2 hours. Although Akira Asano could not explain why not only were there no memories in his brain for these 2 hours, but even his watch seemed to have stopped moving during those 2 hours, but he still believed in his sword more than in mechanical products such as watches. You cannot trust any information obtained from your own senses. Akira Asano finally realized the horror of this forest. In fact, until their current position, except for being bombarded by the 2 warships that crashed many years ago in the forest glade, they have not encountered any substantial danger. But this does not mean that this forest is safe. Compared with this world where hallucinations and illusions are everywhere, making it difficult to distinguish between real and virtual worlds, Asano Akira would rather fight those terrifying monsters. At least, he doesn't have to. Even my own senses are in doubt. Just when Asano Akira was about to plan his next action plan, the tentacles of consciousness extending straight ahead captured a humanoid creature walking through the thick fog, but strangely, everything around this humanoid creature, including Asano Akira, could see everything including the soil, stones, and tree stumps of the mist habitat clearly. But for this humanoid creature, he could only see a general outline and could not capture any details. It was as if he was wrapped in thick fog. No, it was as if he was made of thick fog. But there is one thing Asano Akira can see clearly. In the opponent's hand, he held the knife that belonged to him. It's just that this sword can no longer resonate with Asano Akira's consciousness tentacles. It doesn't belong to him anymore. An inexplicable anger suddenly rose from Asano Akira's heart. He slowly took out a spare wakizashi from his waist and held it tightly in his hand. PS Open the QQ group and open the WeChat friends, they are all showing off their love tonight. I am the only one sitting in front of the computer and coding alone. It is expected that the subscription will drop sharply tonight. So what, if possible, can you subscribe to the latest chapter, Kayulai Cream, Humble, while you are in love? But I still want to wish everyone a happy Chinese Valentine's Day. Lovers will eventually get married, and singles will get out of singles as soon as possible. As for me, I just want to get rich. PPS Thanks to Wang Chuanhe for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter author, and Chen-Mi-san. Chapter 820. Japanese warriors in the old era usually carried 2 swords, one long and one short. For cavalry, they had a longer sword and a wakizashi. For infantry warriors, they carried a shorter sword and a wakizashi. There were also swordsmen. Some warriors will choose to bring an extra kaitong specifically for breaking armor. This is a short sword with a blade length of less than 20 centimeters. The spine of the sword is thicker than that of an ordinary samurai sword. It is generally not used for chopping, but is used to penetrate weak spots on armor. But in actual battles, neither wakizashi nor kaitong are used very often. Except for the two-sword style, Miyamoto Musashi invented the Nidanichi. He holds a dachi in his right hand and a small dachi in his left hand. However, the samurai who imitate him generally do not have this ability, so the two swords are reduced to katana and wakizashi. In addition, even if for caesarean section, wakizashi and kaitong are generally not used, but a special short knife as for the Japanese officers in many film and television works who directly use wakizashi or wakizashi to perform caesarean section. There are only two reasons. First, the production team did not have enough research. Secondly, at that time, the army rarely carried a special dagger for disemboweling, so other things were used instead. The reason for the low usage rate of wakizashi and kaitong is very simple. All cold weapons must follow an iron law in 9 cases out of 10, 1 inch is long, 1 inch is strong, 1 inch is short, 1 inch is dangerous. Although short and delicate weapons have certain advantages in close combat and in small spaces, and they also have portability and flexibility that long weapons cannot match, in most combat situations, they will definitely be suppressed by long weapons. Just imagine, the dagger in your hand has not yet reached the opponent's body, but you are already within the attack range of the opponent's long sword. It is self-evident who has the greater advantage in this kind of battle. Whether they were cavalry or infantry, the ancient armies would inevitably choose long pole weapons such as spears, daggers, axes, and halberds as their main weapons. Even weapons with the name sword like the Pudeo had the same length. More than 150 centimeters. The length of the weapon can often smooth the gap in strength between the two sides, or even lead to overtaking, and the spare wakizashi in Asano Akira's hand has a blade that is only half the length of an Inno alloy sword. As for the strength gap between the two sides, if the figure emerging from the thick fog is the attacker who just appeared in the hallucination, then the opponent's strength will definitely not be inferior to Asano Akira. Even if the previous battle was just an illusion, the murderous intention was not fake. Those who can possess this kind of killing intention will never be weak in combat effectiveness. The blurry figure suddenly raised the knife, the blade pointed upward, and the tip pointed directly at Asano Akira's eyebrows. His originally gentle pace suddenly accelerated, and after 3 steps, he ran directly towards Asano Akira. With a pop sound, the sharp wakizashi was instantly unsheathed, Asano Akira swooped out, and the distance between the two was shortened to less than 3 meters in the blink of an eye. Just as the opponent thrust the knife forward, Asano Akira's upper body suddenly fell backwards, lowering his body's center of gravity again, changing from a running posture to a sliding shovel on the ground. At the same time, he put his left hand in his hand. He slammed the scabbard hard towards the opponent's facade. When Asano Akira's opponent changes his moves, the opponent has only one choice, which is to retreat to the other side, dodge, or use his sword to deflect the incoming scabbard. The original posture of the figure in the mist holding the knife is to thrust upward with the blade. If you want to attack Asano Akira who is close to the ground, you must flip the blade and then slash downward. The direction of the force will be completely opposite to the original action. After completing before he can change his moves, he will be hit in the face by the scabbard. Although the scabbard was out of hand, it was tightly wrapped by the tentacles of Akira Asano's mind. If it were hit on the head, the destructive power would be no less than that of Moju's TAC-50 anti-material sniper rifle held against the head. One shot. Even if it cannot kill the opponent, it is enough to make the opponent lose balance or suffer a brief lag. At this time, Asano Akira, who has closed the distance, can use the wakizashi in his hand to attack the opponent's lower third. This tactic is insidious, but very effective. A warrior, whether it is hand-to-hand combat or unarmed combat, the lower body is the most critical place. Stabilizing the body, moving flexibly, and bursting with strength, the most important thing depends on the muscles of the legs and core. Otherwise, in ancient times, in this era, martial arts practitioners no longer regard Jama Buletin as basic training for entry-level training. When life is truly at stake, there is no such thing as being fair, as long as it can kill the enemy, no matter how sinister or shameless the move is, as long as it can achieve the goal, it is a good move. What's more, Asano Akira used a short weapon that was 1 inch short, 1 inch dangerous. If he didn't rely on cunning and dangerous moves, he would have no chance of winning. However, what he didn't expect was that the opponent completely ignored the sword sheath that he smashed over, and then swung the sword downwards with his backhand. There was no sense of delay or obstruction in his changing moves. Asano Akira even suspected that this was unclear. There are no bones or muscles inside the humanoid, but a thick mist that can change at will like a liquid. The scabbard and the blade approached their respective targets almost at the same time. Asano Akira could only choose to interrupt his offensive and roll to one side in embarrassment. The scabbard he threw passed through the opponent's head and fell to the ground. Akira Asano quickly got up from the ground and backed away. The moment the scabbard came into contact with the thick fog, all the tentacles of thought wrapped around it were melted away, but before the connection between the last tentacle of thought and Asano Akira was severed, Asano Akira still captured a trace of something that was surprising. Shocking news. There is no entity at all in this human form shrouded in thick fog. The scabbard didn't touch anything but the fog. The exaggerated metaphor he just made was actually not wrong. There was indeed no such thing as bones or muscles inside this vague humanoid figure. So, the person fighting me is not a human at all, but it picked up my sword and is still imitating human fighting methods. What on earth is it? Asano Akira thought in his mind. A series of question marks appeared. If Keilan were here, he would definitely choose to try to communicate with the other party at this time. Even if you can't turn enemies into friends, you can at least get some important information, but Akira Asano is not Keilan. He is used to using silence and the weapons in his hands to solve problems. After adjusting his steps slightly, Asano Akira placed Wakaizashi in front of him. Deep in the grey fog forest, there is a blank area. Ivan didn't quite understand why he only took one step back and then retreated from one blank area to another blank area. If this place is compared to the human heart, the thin wall of fog in the middle is like the fleshy diaphragm between the left atrium and the right atrium. Although this metaphor is a bit strange, as a doctor, Ivan, an anatomical diagram of a human heart came to mind subconsciously. It's really strange, but if there is no fog in this area, those monsters will definitely chase them out, right? If it doesn't work, we can only continue to retreat into the thick fog. Ivan turned around to look. At a glance, this fog-free blank area was about 200 meters deep, with only less than 10 foggy habitats sparsely distributed in it. If those monsters chased them out of the thick fog, at his speed, should barely be able to rush into the thick fog at the end of the blank area before being caught up. Just when Ivan was halfway planning his escape route, he suddenly froze on the spot. There was another blank area behind this layer of fog wall, so he should be able to see Keilan, who was retreating together. But he looked around and saw no one except himself. Succabule, a classic Chinese curse, came out of Ivan's mouth. He subconsciously looked down, only to find that the safety rope around his waist had been broken at some point. A layer of cold sweat instantly seeped out from the pores on his back, soaking the underwear on his back. How is this going? Ivan forced himself to calm down. He stood there and waited for 2 seconds. However, no one emerged from the thick fog in front of him and entered this strange blank area. Not only did no one come, but even the biological weapons did not break through the fog wall and chase them here. Logically speaking, a layer of fog wall no more than 1 meter thick is not enough to shield the perception of these monsters. Am I separated from the others? It's impossible, I just took a step back. Ivan's breathing was a little rapid. He glanced at the heart rate monitor inside the breathing mask, and skillfully removed it from his waist. He took out a sedative from the small bag, inserted it into the injection hole reserved on the protective suit, and pushed the liquid into the subcutaneous tissue. As the medicine took effect, Ivan felt that his breathing finally became calmer, but the anxiety and uneasiness in his heart did not slow down at all, but intensified. He took a look at his surroundings, luckily lifted up his breathing mask, raised his head and took a big gulp of vodka. The unique taste of alcohol spreads between the mouth and nasal cavity, and the spicy liquid rolls down the esophagus. Drinking a high degree of vodka will give people the feeling of swallowing a burning knife, but that is the only feeling. Can Ivan calm down quickly? Maybe I should go back to find them. Closing the breathing mask, Ivan quickly made a decision. He shot a spike used to fix the rope into the ground, and then tied the broken section of the safety rope to the lock at the end of the spike. After checking the weapons and ammunition for the last time, he raised his gun and stepped forward into the thick fog. Step. There was thick fog all around, nothing could be seen or heard. 2 steps. As far as the eye can see, there is still a thick fog that is so dense that you can't even see your fingers. 3 steps. Nothing changes. The doubts in Ivan's heart suddenly intensified. Although the gray fog has been spreading towards the interior of the battleship wreckage, it only lasted more than 10 seconds, and the speed of spread was definitely not that fast. He took 3 more steps forward in one breath, and did not stop until the safety rope around his waist was stretched. The wreckage of the battleship, the monsters that followed one after another, those familiar teammates, he saw nothing. There was nothing except the thick gray fog in front, back, left and right. It's really, I've seen a ghost. Ivan continued to walk back without untying the safety rope. He began to retreat until he retreated into the blank area that was not occupied by the fog. The spike was still stuck in the ground, and the end of the safety rope was tied to the buckle, which made him relax a little. Ivan began to observe the boundary between the blank area and the edge of the thick fog. These dense fog did not spread towards the blank area, they seemed to be blocked by an invisible wall. If it were not for the gray fog flow together, this clear boundary may even make Ivan mistakenly think that what is standing in front of him is a towering concrete wall. The invisible wall, is it Zlugo's space barrier? Ivan muttered. Could it be that this blank area not occupied by the gray fog was created by Zlugo? But the problem is that Zlugo, where is she now, and where have the others gone? Why am I the only one in the empty space? Ivan began to look at this extremely strange blank area, and soon he discovered something that seemed normal, but was actually very abnormal. There are very few fog perches in the blank area, but a large number of human corpses are embedded on the pillars of each fog perch. This kind of situation may be seen not far from the red line, but it is absolutely shouldn't be in this place. This place is a full 35 kilometers away from the red line. Even if the creatures in the grey mist forest could carry the bodies of intruders, they would never move them so far away. It is even more impossible that these dead people came here by themselves. Judging from the information currently available, it is possible that the lumberjacks headed by Moju's father and the crew members of the 2 crashed battleships could have reached this depth. However, the corpses in front of them were not wearing clothing from the Air Force fleet. The uniform was a standard Field Corps Marine uniform. One corpse even had the regimental emblem and serial number of the armored unit on its arm. These corpses all came from the armored force that strayed into the grey fog forest and was completely wiped out. Their corpses should never appear in this place. With this idea in mind, Ivan decided to study these corpses first to see if he could find any clues, but when he approached a foggy perch, the corpse embedded in the trunk seemed to be awakened. Suddenly struggled violently. It was as if a chain reaction had been triggered. From near to far, all the corpses on the foggy trees began to move. They used their incomplete bone claws to tear and dig at the wood fibers that imprisoned themselves. In just a few seconds by the end of the day, the corpse that was the first to wake up had already broken free from the shackles of the tree trunk. P.S. There was not much fluctuation in subscriptions yesterday. I felt relieved to see that everyone was staying at home and reading novels alone. Alien Relic Hunter. Author, Chen San. Chapter 821. These corpses were also transformed into biological weapons by the forest. Ivan didn't think the hell-like scene in front of him was so terrifying. This kind of plot would make sense in a thriller-themed movie. But in front of him, a veteran relic hunter who has experienced hundreds of battles, these resurrected corpses are not even comparable to those ghost-faced giant owls just now. The only thing that interests Ivan is that the ligaments connecting the bones of these corpses and the muscles used to drive the bones have been turned into nutrients by the mist purge, but with a few bones, not only can they not when it comes to movement, it's difficult to even maintain a human form. The common monsters, skeleton soldiers in fantasy works, are condensed and driven by magic power, and this magic power is used to replace ligaments and muscles. Once the skeleton soldier is killed, it loses its magic power. After that, even if the entire skeleton was not destroyed, it would instantly be scattered into messy skeletons. For a complete human skeleton like the one in medical school, the things used to replace ligaments and muscles are screws and gears. Without soft tissue, even if hard bones are piled up into the shape of human bones, they will completely lose their mobility. Ivan carefully observed the corpses that had broken free from the tree trunks. He found that each corpse had lost its spine and was replaced by a vine vertebra made of several strands of vines. This vine vertebra is equivalent to the human spine in terms of length, diameter, and curvature, and it fits perfectly into the gap left after these corpses lose their spines. Many vines as thin as hair spread out from this vine vertebra and crawled all over the body of the corpse along the direction of the bones, especially at the joints. A large number of vines were entangled and accumulated, and some even directly pierced the bone and connected the two bones together in a series. It turns out that this is something used to replace ligaments and muscles. The working principle should be similar to the walker mecha we encountered before. After figuring out the reason why these corpses were moving, Ivan suddenly felt that his interest was greatly reduced. The only trace of fear in my heart disappeared completely. Only things that cannot be explained by science scare him. As for monsters that can be explained by science, Ivan will only want to tie them to the dissecting table. He picked up the gun, pointed it at the spine of the corpse closest to him, and pulled the trigger. The needle-shaped electromagnetic bullet fired by the gauze rifle easily broke the replacement spine formed by several strands of vines. The corpse fell to the ground like a puppet whose strings were suddenly cut and stopped moving. Ivan breathed a sigh of relief. A problem that can be solved with a gun is not a problem at all. But the next second, Ivan's slightly relaxed expression became solemn again. Hundreds of tiny vine tendrils sprouted from the section of the vine vertebrae, reconnecting the two broken vine vertebrae. The body that had originally thrown onto the street trembled as if it had received an electric shock, and slowly got up from the ground. At the same time, the corpses from other foggy trees also approached, surrounding Ivan. There is also the ability to regenerate. This is a bit tricky. Ivan took a half step back and glanced at the display screen on the side of the gauze rifle and the equipment used to hang the drum on his waist. The screen showed that the number of remaining ammunition in the gun chamber was 39. There were still 3 large capacity drums hanging on the equipment that could hold 100 rounds of electromagnetic bullets. The high-performance battery with built-in energy crystals was specially designed for the gauze rifle. There are still 4 pieces left. He doesn't have to think about energy issues at all until the bullets are gone. There were a total of 46 resurrected corpses in front of me. No, counting the ones who had just been beaten to death, there should be 47. The ammunition in Ivan's hands alone was enough to kill each corpse more than 7 times. But the problem is that even if these corpses are killed 7, 10, or more times, as long as the vine spine is not crushed into powder, they can be resurrected indefinitely. This is just like the dilemma that the protagonist often encounters in the early stage of common zombie movies. Ordinary zombies are easy to kill, as long as they can hit the head with a bullet. A well-trained armed team can easily kill hundreds of them. Thousands of slow-moving zombies. But before there were zombies with special abilities, the biggest pressure people faced in zombie movies was not the individual combat power of the zombies, but their number. What's the use of killing hundreds or thousands of zombies in a short period of time before facing an entire city's population transformed into a zombie wave? Sooner or later, the bullets will run out, the barrel will overheat if fired continuously, and a person's physical strength will be exhausted. But on the other hand, zombies have no sense of pain, do not understand fear, and their numbers are almost endless, and even if they are killed, he can crawl on the ground with both his legs and his hands, struggling to bite a living person. This is the most frightening thing about ordinary zombies. The best way to deal with them is heavy firepower. Fear comes from insufficient firepower. This is the eternal truth in zombie movies. If you can't replace the pistol with a machine gun, if the machine gun doesn't work, you can clear the ground with heavy artillery, plus a few rounds of surface-to-surface and air-to-surface missiles. Nothing remains except, in addition to fear, there are also zombie ashes. Even if there are no missiles, as long as there is an advanced tactical mecha, it is enough to run rampant among the zombies. In fact, it doesn't need to be too advanced. The Walker mecha, which has been eliminated by the ARC military long ago, is enough to crush those zombies. Just ordinary zombies in movies. But the problem is that Ivan has no heavy artillery, missiles, or mecha. He only has a gauze rifle with limited bullets. The 47 corpses in front of them, before finding a way to prevent their resurrection, can be regarded as an infinite tide of corpses. Ivan put his hand into his backpack, and his fingertips came into contact with several cold metal cylinders. Incendiary bombs? No, this thing is ineffective against them. Before Ivan had time to be happy, the information he had read before setting off came to mind, instantly extinguishing the joy he had just felt. The mist perch is not afraid of fire, otherwise the exploration of the grey mist forest would not be so difficult. The vine spines that control these corpses are essentially the same thing as Kirito and Kirisuke. Even air-dropped napalm bombs can't be used against these things, and throwing incendiary grenades are even less useful. Unless you use a plasma cannon level weapon to directly turn it into ashes, if you rely on napalm alone to burn it, you may not be able to bake the vine spine into charcoal when the fuel is exhausted. It would be nice if other people were here. Ivan sighed. Whether it is Kaylan, Ze Lugo, Asano Akira, 33, or Valentina driving the blasphemer mecha, how can we deal with these? There is no pressure on corpses that can be infinitely resurrected, but these ghosts happen to hit him, the person with the lowest combat effectiveness in the team. It seems that I can really only be regarded as a drag. Ivan sighed helplessly, opened his breathing mask, held up the gun in one hand, grabbed the wine bottle with the other, and drank all the remaining liquid in the bottle in one breath. All poured into the mouth. We can only fight with our last breath. Ivan threw the silver-white metal flask hard and crushed it with his foot. I just don't know how many shots it will take with the gauze rifle to completely break these vine spines. It's really not possible. If he glanced at the hidden grooves inlaid with stalagmite fragments on the cyborg prosthetic limb, as long as those stalagmite fragments are taken out, the uninhibited erosion seed cells will spread in a very short period of time, and he will also gain far beyond normal human power. But if he chooses to do this, he will never have a chance to look back. This has always been a trump card that Ivan has kept. Although he knows very well that the power of a corrosive seed is not very strong, this is the last trump card he can play. But maybe it would be better to end as a human being, right? Ivan took another step back, leaning against the smooth and flat wall of fog, but I still feel a little unwilling. Deep in the grey fog forest, the Genoa high-speed support ship crashed. 33 also looked confused. He didn't know why he just took a step back, but retreated to the inside of the wreckage of the battleship. Logically speaking, that should be the direction away from the wreckage of the battleship, Before it was shrouded in thick fog, there was an open space there. Did some teleportation device be triggered? 33 looked at the rusty and vine-covered cabin wall in front of him and said to himself. From a certain point of view, his luck was the best among the separated people, because the others woke up in the open space. It was difficult to find any abnormalities in the environment for a while, and they all thought they were in near the wreckage of the Xiaojiangkai frigate, and before the thick fog obscured it, it was impossible to tell the east, west, north, and south, but 33 was different. The first thing he saw after waking up was a side with serious paint peeling off. The metal wall, and the change of scenery before and after was too abrupt, which gave him the idea of he was teleported here. But if there is a teleportation device, that girl Ziluo should be able to sense the abnormalities in the space. Well, it may be that the thick fog has blocked her perception. It's hard to say, this forest is it's very weird. Kaylan and the others probably didn't expect that their cheats would one day fail. 33 rolled his wrist, and several black nano-alloy flying blades flew out from the interlayer of the armor, circled around his wrist a few times, and then flew back. His abilities were not affected, which made 33 feel much more at ease. The first thing to figure out right now is where he was transported. There is no doubt that this should be a certain cabin in the wreckage of the battleship, and this cabin should be located relatively inside, at least it has not been affected by the fog yet. Maybe I should go out to find Kaylan and the others, as long as I don't get into a fight, those monsters shouldn't be able to stop me. 33 thought, but if they are also teleported, the situation will be more troublesome. If I leave the wreckage of the battleship, I may trigger the teleportation device again, and I can't tell where I will be teleported to for the second time. The Xiaojiangkai frigate was at least familiar to him, and it was a rare eye-catching symbol in the huge grey fog forest. When the warship crashed and touched the ground, the bow of the warship arched into the ground, but it broke due to the impact. The tail of the battleship stood up unexpectedly, and part of it even passed through the tree canopy and thick fog. As long as the blasphemer mecha rose into the air, the wreckage of the Xiaojiangkai frigate could be located. Therefore, it is the wisest decision to stay inside the battleship wreckage and wait for Kaylan and the others. After discovering that they have been teleported, they will definitely find a way to return to the battleship wreckage. Instead of aimlessly looking for a needle in a haystack, it is better to stand where they are and wait. They come to themselves. So, my luck seems pretty good, 33 scratched his head and said to himself. 33 glanced at the air monitoring data on the display screen of the mask. The air in the cabin fully met the needs of human breathing, so he took off the breathing mask. Although the supply of oxygen generator was sufficient, as a person a veteran of the field corps with rich combat experience, 33 is very aware of the importance of supplies in field operations. Abundance of materials is not a reason to waste. It is good to save a little. Sometimes, it may be the savings that save one's life at a critical moment. I don't know when the fog will spread here, but maybe I can take advantage of this gap to explore this battleship first. 33 made up his mind. Although Kaylan and the others have already explored Xiao, the wreckage of the Jiangkai frigate was seen, but it was only limited to the bridge, and other cabins on the battleship were not seen. Perhaps, there may be some unexpected discoveries. 33 looked around at the cabin he was in. This should be the smoking room on the battleship. The igniter and a garbage box for collecting cigarette ashes and cigarette butts were fixed on the bulkhead. Next to the garbage box was a sunken cupboard. 2 bottles of handheld fire extinguishers are embedded in the cabinet. Welded to the corner of the wall was a large right-angled sofa that could seat 7 or 8 strong men. The simulated leather covering the sofa surface had fallen apart, revealing the yellowed sponge and rusty metal frame underneath. The Xiaojiangkai frigate was in combat mode when it crashed. No one would come to the smoking room at this time, and there should be no valuable clues in this place. With this thought in mind, 33 walked out of the open hatch. But as soon as he walked into the corridor, he made a new discovery, and it was really an unexpected discovery. The flashlight shines on the door number of the cabin opposite. The word bathroom is written on the door number in both Chinese and English. There is no problem with this, but the problem lies in the line of small words below the door number. Flying Fish Class High-Speed Support Ship Genoa. Holy shit, is this the inside of another crashed battleship? P.S. Thanks to the walking support boy for the 1,500 starting coins, thanks to Ju Fengli and Wenwu for the 100 starting coins. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Alien Relic Hunter, author, and Chen San. Chapter 822. I was actually teleported to another crashed battleship. 33 touched his forehead and shined a flashlight at the end of the dark and deep corridor. Compared to the plasma main gun explosion that caused serious damage to the ship's hull, the Shaozhong modified frigate, the Fiyu class high-speed support ship Genoa, has a hull structure that is better preserved. Perhaps it is precisely because there are fewer open wounds on the ship that the speed of the fog penetrating the space inside the ship is also slowed down, 33 thought. I just don't know if this thing can fly. Well, but even if it can fly, I shouldn't be able to activate it with my authority. It would be nice if that kid Kaylan was here. 33 used the beam of flashlight to shine. I scanned the corridor wall and quickly found a route map printed on the wall. Although this road map has faded and become mottled, at least the location and direction of each cabin can be roughly distinguished. 33 waved his hand, and two black sharp blades immediately flew over and cleared away the vines covering the route map, revealing the entire map. From the route map, it can be known that from the side where 33 is currently standing, the left-hand side is the direction leading to the stern of the ship, and the right side is the direction leading to the bow. This is completely consistent with one thing he knows. There is an unwritten rule in military airships built by ARC. All bathroom doors are set up to face the starboard side. Some boring people once analyzed this, saying that because most of ARC's battleships are asymmetrical in design, and the number of turrets on the starboard side of the hull is far more than that on the port side, most battleship captains and commanders like to greet the enemy. When encountering an enemy, turn the rudder full to the left, pointing the starboard side where the firepower is more rapid, and at the same time hiding the port side where the barrage is weaker. With such operating habits, most battleships turn left more frequently than right. If the bathroom is built on the right side, the filth in the pipes is likely to spurt out of the toilet under the action of centripetal force. Come out and stage a farce of painting the wall with feces. This argument seems reasonable, but in fact it is untenable. Let's not talk about whether ARC's warships really focus on starboard firepower, and whether the captains and commanders have the habit of using starboard to meet the enemy. The most important thing is the only point is that the actual situation is only that the door of the bathroom faces the starboard side, and not all bathrooms are located on the left side of the battleship. Those bathrooms located on the right side also open to starboard. Besides, if centripetal force will throw excrement out of the pipe, this has nothing to do with the location of the bathroom and the direction of the bathroom door. The only thing that is directly related is the structural design of the sewage pipe. The person who posted this article is completely changing the concept. What's more, battleships are equipped with special anti-reverse seepage designs. If the crew's excrement can spray out from the toilet, the battleship designer will probably be ashamed. Suicide and apology. 33 still remembers that after reading this article on a military forum during his leisure time, he shared it as a joke with his comrades in the team, but at that time, the group laughed together and most of the brothers who scolded and complained together are no longer alive. Many of them have not even been able to recover their identity plates, not to mention their corpses. 33 is different from Leighton and Laugo. He is never willing to call soldiers' identification tags dog tags because he feels that every soldier is a living person, they are individuals, and not a dog. Soldiers must obey orders. This has always been said, but if you think about what happened in the past, aren't the people above treating you like dogs? No, not even worse than dogs. It was a sentence that Laugo once said to 33. Because of this sentence, the two almost started fighting. Fortunately, Zwilligito and Leighton pulled them away in time. 33 shook his head slightly, putting aside these messy memories, and continued to observe the road map on the wall. The location he is currently in is the crew dormitories and living area located in the middle and rear of the battleship, and the bridge is located 1/3 of the front of the battleship. If you want to go to the bridge, you have to walk towards the right-hand side of the bow. Go. Although 33 knew that it was impossible to control the Genoa with his own authority, he still decided to go to the bridge. On the bridge of the Shaojiang Reform, Kailan met the former captain of that battleship. Even though the captain had turned into some kind of monster, Kailan still successfully communicated with him, although the 313 did not know the specific content of the communication between the two parties, but Kailan obviously obtained some important information from it. Battleships are difficult to control. The captain was retained by the Grey Mist Forest. Maybe he needs to be able to control the battleship. Then, will there be a captain on the bridge of the Genoa? What about the captain who was transformed into a monster? If so, then it might also be able to communicate with itself? If you can talk, just talk. If you can't talk, just take action. There's nothing to be afraid of. 33 made up his mind, turned to the right, and walked forward along the corridor. The floor of the corridor is covered with rust. These places should have been covered with anti-slip rubber mats, but now the rubber mats have aged and fallen off, exposing the metal plates underneath. The soles of the boots made of special rubber made a dull dong-dong sound when they stepped on the metal ground. This dong-dong sound echoed in the corridor. Together with the silent environment, it suddenly gave off the atmosphere of a horror movie. It's full. Vaguely, 33 felt like he heard another footsteps that were not echoes, not far behind him. When he walked, the footsteps would sound. When he stopped, the footsteps will also stop. If he is fast, the opponent is also fast. If he is slow, the opponent is also slow. The thing that made the footsteps was obviously using the echo generated by 33's footsteps as a cover. I have to say that this trick was quite effective. At least 33 didn't notice it until it was followed nearly 30 meters away. It's strange. Compared with Kailan and Asano Akira, 33's perception ability is slightly inferior, but as a veteran who retired from the Special Forces, he is still very vigilant. What? 33 stopped and pretended to look at the ceiling and both sides of the corridor. After scanning around, he started to walk forward. But just as his front foot landed, his back foot twisted his ankle and turned around 180 degrees, shining the flashlight pole directly behind him. About 10 meters away, a humanoid creature stood vaguely, but this humanoid creature was covered with a thin layer of gray fog. Even if it was directly illuminated by a high-lumen tactical flashlight, its true appearance could not be seen clearly. Appearance. The only thing 33 can be sure of is that this person is dead. A steel pipe more than 1 meter long, with the ends twisted into twists, penetrated the chest of the humanoid creature. The gray mist did not wrap up the steel pipe. 33 could clearly see that there was no trace of it in one place. There is also an inscription stamped with a steel stamp on the rust-covered area, which reads B-16 cabin, air supply pipe. Is this guy a crew member who died on the Genoa? 33's mind immediately restored the simulated scene of the crew member's death. When the Genoa fell, the powerful impact broke the air supply pipe in the B-16 cabin, causing the steel pipe to turn into a sharp weapon and penetrate it directly. Of course, this crew member may have died before being punctured by the air supply pipe. 33 has also seen the combat images left on the surviving battleships. Given the speed at which the Genoa crashed, most of the people in the battleship would have been crushed by the excessive G-force before the battleship even touched the ground. Internal organs. The battle happened so suddenly that these crew members had no time to put on protective clothing with anti-G-force effect. Additional explanation, The setting of the protective suit draws on the plot of the Gundam series. This type of anti-gravity protective suit also has various functions of a space suit. The style is relatively bloated, and the movement will be greatly affected after wearing it. Therefore, the crew on the ship generally these things would only be worn when the warship might be damaged or even sunk. The Special Operations Fleet was suddenly attacked, and the battle became intense from the beginning and continued until the entire fleet exited the Grey Fog Forest. Only a handful of people in the entire fleet have the opportunity to wear these life-saving protective suits. This humanoid creature pierced by a steel pipe showed an extremely uneasy state after being shrouded in the beam of flashlight. It raised its arms in front of it, as if it wanted to cover its face with its hands. Even though it was 30 years old, San couldn't see clearly what its face looked like. "Hey! Are you a crew member on this Genoa? Can you understand what I say?" 33 shouted. He did not launch an attack immediately, but tried to communicate with the other party. After all, this guy was just following behind him and showed no hostility, and after being discovered by 33, he didn't pounce on him either. This is different from those monsters lurking in horror movies or horror games where the protagonist is caught. The behavior after discovery was completely different. At least, 33 feels that there is no need to regard it as an enemy for the time being. Of course, not being hostile is one thing, but second-hand preparations still have to be made. More than a dozen black nano-alloy flying blades used the cover of the dark environment to cling to the floor and walls outside the range of the flashlight beam. It flew out from the ceiling and hovered around the humanoid creature. As long as it made the slightest movement, these dozen flying blades could instantly chop it into pieces. No, to be precise, it cannot be called a humanoid creature, because it is impossible for a person to continue to survive after being penetrated by a steel pipe, so it is either a dead thing, or it has become something like a monster like the captain of Shaojiankai. However, 33 was afraid of irritating the other party, so he did not directly call it monster, but used as calm a tone as possible to conduct the conversation. "Hey, brother, don't be nervous, we are one of our own." 33 only said that he was one of our own and did not explicitly say that he came from the Ark, because he was not sure that these undead crew members would be sent to carry out such a do. The crew members of the Death Mission have hatred towards the Ark and human society in their hearts. 33 must not only show his goodwill, but also obscure his identity as much as possible. He doesn't want to start a fight if he doesn't agree with the other party. Although he wasn't afraid of fighting, he wouldn't be able to get more information from the opponent. The human figure shrouded in gray mist stopped twisting, and the hands covering its face were slowly lowered. It seemed to be looking at 33, although 33 couldn't see the other person's eyes, he could feel it. A line of sight swept across his body. Strange, is that layer of gray fog one-way perspective? Why can't I see this thing, but it can see me through the gray fog? 33 muttered in his heart, but continued on his lips. Strike up a conversation. "Brother, can you understand what I'm saying?" 33 leaned forward slightly, raised his hands to indicate that he had no weapons in his hands, and then repeated the sentence in English. Chinese and English are the two official languages of ARC. Regardless of race, blood status, or other status, everyone must master one of these two languages, otherwise they will not be able to live in ARC or among the existing human beings. Live in society. If the other party can't understand both Chinese and English, then 33 will have nothing to do. After turning into a monster, can I only communicate in the language of Alpha civilization? But the problem is that I don't know the language of Alpha civilization. It would be great if that guy Kaylan was here. Maybe I should watch this guy and wait. Kaylan and the others found this place, but the question is, what should I do if this guy wants to escape or becomes hostile to me during this period? 33's brain turned rapidly. Its strength should be it won't be too strong, otherwise it wouldn't choose to follow me secretly. But the problem is that if this guy really can only understand the language of Alpha civilization, and I kill it, wouldn't it be equivalent to destroying me? Lost an important clue? Even if Kaylan doesn't know how to be a monster, I can't accept this fact myself. Just when 33 was struggling in his heart, a somewhat jerky voice came from the human form shrouded in grey mist. Are you, the person, who came in, from the outside? The sound was like two pieces of rusty iron rubbing against each other. It was extremely harsh. It was obvious that the owner of the vocal cords had not spoken for a long time. But this does not affect Sanzan's ability to understand the other party's words. It speaks Chinese. P.S. Thanks to Brother Menman for the 700 starting coins, thanks to Jiyat and Gunyuyi Deo for the 500 starting coins, thanks to Gong Chu Hemming, Su Tianbao, Shiyo 202204181640362203, and Shiyo 201707080614398446 for the 100 starting coins. Alien Relic Hunter Author, and Chenmi San. Chapter 823. Can you understand what I'm saying? 33 asked excitedly. He had given up hope just now, but when the familiar Chinese syllables came out of the other party's mouth, no matter how the tone sounded, it was weird and jerky, but it still made 33 feel an inexplicable sense of intimacy. If you came in from outside, why? But the other party did not answer 33's question. Instead, he asked 33 a second question. Although the other party did not show any hostile behavior, and the tone and intonation did not change at all, but for some reason, 33 always felt that this thing that was having a conversation with him, it seemed nervous. Why? A huge question mark popped up in 33's heart. To be nervous, I should feel nervous myself. Why does it feel nervous? Could it be that it was aware of those black flying blades hidden in the shadows, pointing at its vital parts? 33's little finger hooked slightly, and he quietly withdrew most of the flying blades, leaving only the last two staying about 10 meters behind the opponent. Why, you came into the forest, you shouldn't. The humanoid figure covered in thick fog continued, its speaking speed slightly faster than before. 33 originally wanted to answer that he went into the forest to look for the crashed battleship, but if he said that, he might be mistaken for someone sent by the undead crew, and he could not be sure whether the other party was harboring suspicions about the Ark's senior management. When there is hatred, once you choose the wrong camp, you are likely to start a fight over a disagreement. Such a development is definitely not what 33 wants to see. But if you say that you are being hunted by indigenous creatures and are forced to flee into the grey mist forest, let's not talk about whether this cheap lie will be seen through by the other party. The most important point is that you are assuming that you are forced to do so. Under the premise of entering the forest, their first goal must be to escape from this place, which is completely contrary to their original purpose of going to the core of the forest. Instead of falling out after the lie is exposed, it's better to speak clearly now. I want to go to the center of the grey mist forest, 33 said seriously. We want to find out the secrets hidden in this forest, but now I am separated from my companions, and I myself I don't know how it was teleported to the inside of this battleship. If you have been on this battleship before, you should know that this battleship has been bombing a certain area in the forest before it crashed twice. Yes, its bombing target is our group of people. After explaining everything clearly in one breath, 33 breathed out a sigh of relief, and then stared at the other party. Next, we have to see what this person who is suspected of being a former crew member of the Genoa will do. What a reaction. No. Never, don't, try to, explore, anything, any secrets. After hearing 33 mention the secrets of the forest, the other party suddenly became excited. Two words, even though it was wrapped in a layer of thick fog, the arms that still looked as thin as wood waved vigorously. Forget everything in this forest, and then escape from here, never, never come back again. Don't either. Let no one, don't let anyone in. Why? What secrets are hidden in the forest? 33 frowned. Is there anything that can't be said? Why don't you tell me what you know first? If this secret is really not suitable for public disclosure in this world, I will naturally let it rot in my stomach. No. When you find out, everything will be irreversible. The other party shook his head repeatedly, causing the steel pipe inserted in his chest to shake. Why can't it be undone after I know everything? 33's inner doubts became more serious. No matter how shocking the secret is, even if it can subvert the entire human civilization, I can't take any measures now that I know it. I'm just a curious ordinary person, I don't have that much energy. No, no, no. You misunderstood what I meant. The figure wrapped in grey mist squatted down, and the steel pipe on its chest hung down directly and touched the ground, making a crisp sound of gold and iron. Ring. It seemed to be recalling something painful, with its head lowered and its arms tightly wrapped around its head. What misunderstanding? You didn't tell me what the secret was, so you asked me to forget everything. I don't even know it yet. How can I forget it? 33 asked inexplicably. Cognition is pollution. The other party murmured, as if talking to himself, as if he was saying to 33, the root of everything comes from that place, there is pollution. The source, no matter how, the contamination will spread, we must leave this place immediately. The source of the pollution? Are you referring to the core area of the grey mist forest? 33 grabbed the key information in the words and asked. No. It's not. Where is the source? Don't ask, don't know, forget everything. The other party buried his head lower. I seem to understand what you mean. Cognition is pollution. You mean that as long as you know that information, you will be polluted, right? What does pollution mean? 33's eyebrows suddenly raised. Subconsciously holding his breath, could it be that contaminated means becoming what you are now? You asked me to forget everything to protect me. The other party didn't reply, probably acquiescing to 33's statement. However, the purpose of our trip is to explore the secrets of the core area of the grey mist forest, and, as far as we know, there is probably a logger who has entered the core area before us. Oh, by the way, then the lumberjack's name is Emos Woryui. He was once a member of the Special Operations Fleet, but a fleet can have thousands of people at least. You and he are not on the same battleship, so there is a high probability that you will not listen. Said he. Emojo, Rui, no, I know him. The human figure covered in thick fog suddenly said something that made Sansan somewhat unexpected. He is, a member of this battleship. He was the Genoa's information control officer, I remember him. How is this possible? 33 couldn't help but widen his eyes. Emos Woryui is obviously the CIC information control officer of another battleship. I remember that it was a Shanyan-class high-speed support ship called Faveli, hull number B92013. Instead of this flying fish, no matter the ship model, hull number, or name, it doesn't match the number. The only thing that matches is his position. Could you be misremembered? No. Emos Woryui, he is, our ship's, CIC, information control officer. The human figure covered in thick fog said, I won't remember wrong, because he is my superior. Obviously, the human figure in front of him was once a member of the Genoa Combat Intelligence Center. Its tone was very determined, and it didn't seem like it was a misremembering. Could it be that the files on ARC's side have been modified? But with K. Ian's authority, what he got should be the most original files. There can be no mistakes. The identity of a small person like Emos Woryui is also impossible. Are you tired of it? Did you bother those big shots to hide it? If those big shots could notice this, it would be impossible for Emos Woryui to leave the Ark and enter the grey mist forest many times. Those guys should have done it from beginning to end. I have never paid attention to Emos Woryui. No. There is another possibility. They have been observing Emos Woryui and treating him as an experiment, but this possibility is very low. According to K. Ian's description, the undead crew's desire to control is almost abnormal. They don't like anything beyond their control, and allowing Amos Woryui to freely enter and leave the Ark and the Grey Mist Forest is equivalent to setting off fairy rods in the gunpowder magazine. As long as there is even a little spark splashing, the consequences will be. The possibility that the file has been modified can basically be ruled out. Could it be that the staff who made the record made an error? But this error is too coincidental. First, because of the error, Amos Woryui's warship was mistakenly assigned, and then he escaped because of the registration errors after the war. No matter what the situation was, the registration information needs to be verified by multiple people, so there won't be errors for every staff member, right? For some reason, 33 suddenly remembered the missing lumberjack Danning. During that time, everyone had forgotten his existence, but by the time someone remembered him, he had really disappeared. Could it be that the memories of the staff responsible for registration were also tampered with? But the problem is that these people have never even been close to the Grey Mist Forest. If the mysterious power in the Grey Mist Forest could affect the people on the Ark from such a distance, there would have been big trouble. Wait a minute. The guy in front of me just said. Cognition is pollution if analyzed according to this idea. As long as you know certain things, you will become a monster and your thinking will be eroded. Is it because of this? Amos Woryui himself is already related to the secrets in the Grey Mist Forest, so his existence can be regarded as part of the pollution, and those responsible for registration have never met Amos Woryui. They have not had any form of direct contact with him, but as long as they know the existence of Amos Woryui, can they achieve the conditions for the spread of so-called contamination? So it makes perfect sense that they would be affected by the mysterious power in the Grey Fog Forest. 33 suddenly felt a chill running down his spine. If even those staff members would be affected, wouldn't they have already been severely polluted? No wonder the guy in front of me wants to forget everything. 33 couldn't help but feel a little scared. When a person can't even trust his own memory, what else can he trust? Then Amos Woryui should have crashed into this forest with you and this battleship. Why did he appear on the Ark again? He even formed a team of lumberjacks and tried to enter again and again. Deep in the forest, could it be that he came out of it originally? If Amos Woryui was buried in the Grey Fog Forest with the Genoa, then the key on his original file was correct and not a mistake. But how did he come out of the forest alone? The most critical point is that there must have been no apparent changes in his body, otherwise it would be impossible for him to return to the Ark and live a normal life, and it would also be impossible for his daughter Emoju and those companions who spend time together day and night. No abnormalities will be found in him. Unless he uses the mysterious power of the Grey Mist Forest to modify everyone's perception of himself just like he modifies his own files. For example, suppose that Amos Woryui's true appearance has turned into a monster covered with tumors, but under the influence of that mysterious power, anyone who sees him still looks like a normal human being, even if he uses the photos and videos taken by other equipment truly recorded the image of the monster covered in sarcoma. Others who saw the photos and videos would only subconsciously think that it was a normal human being. Just like everyone in the exploration team subconsciously forgot the existence of Tanning. I should have asked Emoju if he had any photos of his father. Even if we can't see the problem, Kaylan and Ze Luo might be able to find some clues. Don't ask, forget him, forget Amos Woryui. The figure wrapped in thick fog almost said in a pleading tone, forget everything related to this forest. Maybe it's still too late. Okay, 33 also squatted down, keeping his eyes level with the other person's head. Even if you want me to forget all this, the problem is that I am already deep in this forest. The depth of where I am now is about 35 kilometers, and I can't even leave, so how can I forget everything related to this forest? The other party didn't answer. Obviously he was also confused by 33's question. You see, this problem has come back to the far point again. 33 shrugged. Speaking of which, Amos Woryui, should be the only one among you who successfully left this forest, right? If you can tell him what happened, and maybe I can walk out. PS Thanks to Brother Menman for the reward of 1,500 starting coins, thank you to Lao Na for the reward of 500 starting coins, thank you Gong Chu Hemming and Book Friend 201702202101470110 for the reward of 100 starting coins. Also, I want to tell you guys who are tipping people, if the amount of the tip is 1,500 starting coins, which is more than 15 yuan, try not to tip it several times. A one-time tip of 1,500 starting coins can be used to vote for an additional monthly ticket. After a few separations, I no longer have monthly passes, and my blood is lost.